small amount of papers this time in the PDF file. I hit print before I realized how many pages it was. They will all be recycled though, so don't worry. All right, let me start up the recording here. We are live on YouTube now. And all right, and we are recording on Zoom as well. And let me just check to make sure I've got all the board members on. So I see Cheryl, I know, is on. Juliet, not seen yet. Looks like Karen's in the waiting room, so get her in. Gwen, I see, is on. Mike's on. Maureen's on. Mary Lee, Dr. Harrison, and Dr. Pearson Ugal, and Mr. Zachary, all on. Okay. All right, I think we've got quorum. We've got everybody. I still don't see Juliet, so I think we've got everybody from the board except Juliet. My count. Okay. All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? So I will go ahead and call the regular meeting of the Region 9 Board of Education to order via Zoom, pursuant to Executive Order number 7B at 7:38 p.m. And all members of the board are present except for Juliet Berry, Dr. Harrison, Dr. Pearson Ugal, and Mr. Zachary, all present as well, and several members of the public. All right, so our first item of business is the approval of the minutes, and we have quite a few. So I'll look for a motion, either if we want to take them individually or as a block, and block would be the preference. So I have approval of minutes from the Region 9 Board of Education Annual District Meeting on May 3rd, 2021. The Region 9 Board of Education Regular Meeting on May 18, 2021. The ER9 Joint Boards of Education Regular Meeting on May 25th, 2021. And the ER9 Joint Boards of Education Special Meeting on June 1st, 2021. So I will look for a motion to move the entire block or individually.
So moved, Karen.
All right, so we have a motion from Karen to approve the block. Do I have a second? Board member Maureen as the second. All right. Any conversation, any changes, corrections, clarification?
I noticed just one on the May 18th minutes, page 3, under the Director of Special Services report. I think it was just a autocorrect. It should be DBT, not DDT.
That was the May 18th. All right, noted. Cheryl?
And just 2 typos on name spelling. So this is the May 25th minutes on pages 5. With me, I'm looking at this. Pages, I think it's 6 and 7. 2 names are misspelled. One is Marianne Carmen, should be C-A-R-M-A-N, and Jack Bebon should be B-E-B-O-N.
All right.
Or actually, I'm sorry, it should be Agnes Bebon, B-E-B-O-N. Apologies.
Agnes, okay. Yeah. All right, noted. Any other changes? All right, seeing none, then all in favor of passing the block of minutes as corrected, signify by aye. Opposed? Abstained, so it carries 7-0. So all the minutes are approved. Thank you for that. All right, moving on then to item, and that's a big chunk of the papers. So we'll move on then to public comment item number 3. So any members of the public, if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand in the symbols or wave in your window. We will ask you to unmute. We'd like you to introduce yourself and your address for the record, and limit your comments to 2 minutes, and to the items on the agenda would be the preference. And first, and Cheryl, if you can help me find people.
See,
I see Dana's hand first, and then I see Suzanne as well. So Dana, find you. There you go. Go ahead.
Dana Benson, 34 Pond Road, Easton. That's 34 Pond Road, Easton. I wanted to comment on the surveys. The glitches that were reported last week on Facebook, they were discussed last night at the Easton Board of Education meeting. So I know Dr. Harrison is aware of the concerns of parents. We're still getting reports that parents are able to take these parent surveys a number of times. People that are not parents have been sent the link and are able to come in to the survey form. And, you know, I received a copy of the link. I didn't take the survey. I'm not out to destroy the survey. I was against the survey, but now that we're doing it, the concern is the data integrity. So myself and the other people who are allied with me would suggest strongly that the central office find a different methodology for putting this survey out, so that there's no question about the integrity of the results. Whether the thing is gamed or not gamed at this point doesn't matter, because the perception is that it could have been gamed. And I really think that we have to fix this if we're going to have confidence in the results. So one solution was to have a one-time code that a user could use one time to get access to the survey, and after that be blocked, or a proposed idea. Once again, I'm no computer data expert, but parents are extremely concerned about this issue. The other possibility discussed last night at the Easton meeting, suggested by Mr. Stimson, was perhaps SurveyMonkey we could tie an email address to the survey, and then the person could take the survey, and SurveyMonkey could keep separate the email address of the person from his actual response, and only pass on the response to the school district. Because, as you know, when an email address is a way to keep a person from taking a survey twice. I mean, that email address is only once. So anyway, I'm not going to belabor the point. I know that this is not an agenda item, but it is an area of big concern. And I know Dr. Harrison's well aware of the concerns, as I'm sure you guys are. So we'll just leave it at that. But my suggestion would be to take a pause, figure it out, maybe disregard whatever was collected last week, delay it a week or something, and get it right, because it's really important. As you guys voted for this thing, and everybody talked about how important this information is. I had a different point of view, but that's okay. But now that we're collecting the information, I think it has to be collected in a way that's scientifically sound. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for your time. All right. I think Susan. Go ahead. You should be unmuted now. Go ahead. Oh,
Still muted.
Again. Still muted, Suzanne.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Oh,
Name and address for the record.
Dan,
And then 2 minutes.
6 Blackrock Turnpike, Reading. I wanted to make a comment about the graduation. It was the most lovely, beautiful graduation I've ever seen. It was like a Hollywood movie. The birds were chirping, the sky was blue. I mean, it was beautiful. And the speeches were great. And I hope so much that we can have outdoor graduations in the future. I just think that is incredible. I always hoped that stadium would be used that way when we were building it, and there it was. So I just wanted to say that I loved it. And I also wanted to mention that for the first time, I watched the tri-board meetings. It took like 6 days for me to get through them. They were so long, but I did. And I wanted to, a lot of the people that made speeches are not on this board, but I just wanted to say how impressed I was with the eloquence, the thoughtfulness, the unique perspectives of many elected board members in Easton and in Reading and for Region 9, how impressed I was with everybody. So that's my comment. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Suzanne. All right. Other members of the public for comment? Don't see anyone else. Cheryl, do you see anyone or any of the other
Nope.
board members see anyone else? Okay. All right, seeing no other members, we'll move on to item 4, board member comment. Members would like to comment. Maureen?
First, I agree wholeheartedly that this was the prettiest graduation that I have ever sat through, both as a board member and as a parent of 3 kids that graduated from Barlow. It was a picture perfect day, and you couldn't have orchestrated a better graduation. So kudos to the staff who pulled that off. And it was a welcome respite after the year that the kids went through, and I think they deserved it. It was a little bit of grace for all of them. My second comment really has to do with my role as a board member. I know that these boards, and I don't know that I speak for everyone, but I speak for some, function very well together. We work cooperatively and collaboratively. We are thoughtful, and we carefully debate every decision that's made. And when we get to a decision, we all stand behind it. That is my role as a board member, whether I agree or disagree with the decision. And I would suggest to some members of the public that some of the mechanisms that are currently being employed to question after the fact the board members' decisions really don't function to do that. What they do is suggest that our decisions haven't been made in a thoughtful, cared, and considerate manner. And I would just suggest that people be a little bit more thoughtful about the mechanisms they use to question our decisions, particularly after the fact. I know that I view attacks on the board members individually and collectively as attacks on the whole. And I would caution people when we have people who are here and elected and working in the public trust to do those criticisms in a thoughtful and considerate way. I think that functions in the best interests of the towns and of us as a board as a whole. So thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Other board members for comment? Cheryl?
I pretty much echo everything that Maureen said, and I think with respect to the public trust and the thoughtful nature by which all of the boards deliberate, we're volunteers, and as a collective, we read all the comments. And what I might urge those who do engage in the process, again, thank you for your participation. But if in the interest of providing accurate information, would extremely support, to the extent that the public is not sure of what the facts are, to encourage the public to visit www.er9.org to get the accurate information there. And all of our contact information is available. And so people can reach out to us to the extent that there is something that's inaccurate in mailers, communications, and social media. We're all available, and we do respond to emails. So I would encourage the public to reach out to us as well as the administration to clarify the facts, so that, and again, know that we're here representing all of you, and that we make our decisions very carefully and consider all views.
Okay. Thank you. Any other board members? Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I won't take long. I just want to thank Maureen and Cheryl for their thoughtful and appropriate comments, and say that I agree with everything they said, and that the board really works hard in a thoughtful, careful, and collaborative manner, and that again, I echo their sentiments exactly. I can't state them better than they did before, but I do appreciate their thoughtful comments, and thank you.
Thank you. All right, other board members, any other comments? All right, seeing none, then we'll move on to item 5, administrative reports. I don't think we have too many administrative reports this evening. So I will, they're in my big pile here. So I know Dr. Harrison or Dr. Pearson-Ugal, if there are any reports out, or I know Mr. Zachary, we've got some finance items in the pack. So
I did want to take an opportunity just to, I think it was at the last regular Region 9 board meeting, we talked about bringing some of the preliminary results as part of the our reports at this meeting. Preliminary results from the equity audit that we've been doing at the high school with our equity committee and in collaboration with our work with the Connecticut Center for School Change. So we are grateful to have Carrie Lord and Patrice Nelson with us this evening. I shared board members with you, just give you a copy of their total part one report and the slide deck to go along with that. We'll make sure that we post that under meeting materials as well, so that it's available going forward. But just they were kind enough to offer to be present tonight and to walk through briefly the work that they've done just leading up to and then encompassing the equity audit, and just give them initial findings from this first pass at the data. As you know, we will continue to move this work forward with looking at our diversity, equity, and inclusion surveys, and those results over the summer in collaboration with our climate committee, and be able to pair that back with the rest of this audit to have a more comprehensive report to share with the board and the community as we go forward. So Todd, with your permission, I'd like to have Carrie and Patrice, and I know that if they could have the ability to share screens, and they can share that slide deck as well.
do that right now. Okay. Carrie and Patrice, you're now co-hosts. You can share. And if you have problems, I do have the materials up. So if you're having issues with it, let me know and I can share on as well.
Great. Thank you, Todd. I appreciate that. Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for allowing us to take just a few moments of your time to walk you through the preliminary findings of a report that we've been working on for the last few months. And I just want to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Carrie Lord. I've been with the center for going on 9 years. And the center is a nonprofit organization, and we are devoted to doing work with schools and districts across the state. And a big part of our mission statement is to really support schools and districts in creating equitable access, opportunities, experiences, and outcomes for students. And so I wanted to just give you a little bit of background about our organization. And of course, you can always look us up online. And I want to just give my partner an opportunity to introduce herself before we get started. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I'm Patrice Nelson. Carrie's already explained the organization. I've actually been with the organization since 2003, so I think I'm the person on staff who's been there the longest. And it's been a real privilege and delight to work with Region 9 Joel Barlow High School staff, parents, community members, students this year. And I look forward to sharing some of our results.
All right, so I'm gonna just share the screen and get us started with these first slides. I always joke that we're a couple moments away from, clicks away from seeing everything that we need to see. Here we go. All right, so, okay, so we're just gonna get started and let you know that we at the Center for School Change were able to engage in Region 9 in 3 different bodies of work. And tonight we're here to just talk about one of the bodies of work, which was to partner with the school staff, conduct an equity audit, which is focused on school and district policies and practices. Look at the high school the curriculum and program participation, as well as complete preliminary analysis of the data to provide an overview to district leadership, which is what we're doing tonight. I just want to note that we had an opportunity to engage in some focus group work, and we spent some time with the Joel Barlow staff, engaging them in professional learning experiences. And we also had an opportunity to convene a Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee, whose membership included students, parents, teachers, administration, and support staff. And they were really an amazing group of people who came together, and had wonderful, wonderful contributions to our conversations. So I just give you a little background about what an equity audit is. It's a fairly straightforward approach to really trying to determine areas of inequities that exist. And so we had an opportunity to look at some data and identify some organizational systemic strengths and blind spots. And we had an opportunity to collect and review some disaggregated data, looked at some policies and practices, and were able to garner some student, parent, administrators, and staff voice in service of some core questions that were set forth by district leadership. So for this audit, our data essentially focused on areas that research consistently show are likely sites for inequities. And so we used multiple measures to examine these areas for inequities. And ultimately, an equity audit is really a useful tool to provide helpful, relevant information that can support improvement planning. And so it's an opportunity for a district. We always say data have no answers. They just help you ask great questions. So we have a slide deck that we've prepared as a report in two parts. And tonight we're just focusing on the first part. And the first part is really a review of the demographic, climate, participation, and achievement data. And we also looked at some key school artifacts, including the mission statement, guiding principles, learning expectations for Joel Barlow High School, as well as the handbook addendum with some highlights. And we also looked at the ER9 Safe Plan. We had a chance to look at some select questions for the climate survey. And we also looked at the course catalog, the program of study, and we also reviewed select board policies. And so those are the data that we looked at for part one. And you can see here that we have similar data for part two with the addition of the focus group that we conduct. Okay, so the methodology for our equity audit was a review, and you can see here, I'm sorry to be reading the slides to you, but I think it's just the best way to sort of walk you through quickly. We just looked at demographic, climate, participation, and achievement data. And we looked at essentially a variety of data forms. So basically this methodology says we looked at data, we looked at disaggregated data, which is one of the most important points of an equity audit. We looked at the key artifacts, and we really tried to identify discrepancies between outcomes and policies and practices. Right, so we know that you have stated that one of the goals, right, is, and part of your mission and goals and objectives is to really ensure that all students are successful in your district. We got input, and I think this was really important, input from the Joel Barlow High School Advisory Committee to help develop the focus group questions. And we were able to conduct some interviews on focus groups and there was a very small sample size, but we were able to get some really wonderful information. And then we triangulate all of these data sources. So we look at the interviews, the focus groups, and the artifacts, and basically the qualitative and the quantitative data sources. And we try to identify what some of the trends and patterns that are happening for students in Region 9. And we use this triangulation approach as a way to sort of verify findings and eliminate any unverified or outlier data that might exist, okay? And so that was our methodology. And then again, now this is a little redundant, but just this idea that we just wanted you to see the data that we did look at, and it's laid out for you here. As comprehensive as we could get. We all know that there was a little bit of some absent data for 2019, 2020 due to the pandemic. But we had a variety of data sources to review here. And that did help us move us forward in being able to analyze, and review your data. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my partner. Patrice, I'm happy to keep driving if you want me to just move the slides forward, and you can just say next slide.
I'll do that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So next slide. So Bruce Wellman and Laura Lipton capture perfectly our approach to this equity audit, which is to emphasize that data are simply information. Carrie already talked about that briefly. It's humans that make meaning of it. And a piece of our approach, because they're objective, is to ask questions. And the questions we ask that you're going to hear us report on tonight are, what do we notice? And we're talking about what do we notice in terms of equity, disproportionalities, in terms of your goals for equity as stated in your policies. And the second is, if these are what we notice, what questions do they raise and where do they direct the next step in terms of investigation? Next. So this is simply a restatement of everything that Carrie just went over. I did want to point out, some of you may wonder why we stuck with 2018-19 as opposed to 2020-21. And one of the reasons was this was the most reliable data source that we could get, and the data source where we had multiple sources of data for the same year. So for example, in 2018-19, you also completed a climate survey. So that gave us an opportunity to crosswalk. We did look at 1920, but as Carrie said, that was a very limited profile and performance report, and limited data available from the district from the school as well. Next. Oops. Okay, so you're going to see in blue that as a result of this first review, of a deep review, we noticed this key finding. And I'm going to read it to you because it's particularly relevant. It sounds pretty straightforward, but because it's in a number of data places, indicators, it's pretty important, we thought. On key indicators in the profile and performance reports and the Joel Barlow High School Equity Audit related to 4 areas: achievement, participation, attendance, and discipline, there were 3 groups of students that stand out as having consistently disproportionate outcomes as compared to all the other groups in Joel Barlow High School. Those are students with individual education programs, or IEPs, students who are eligible for free and reduced price meals, which we abbreviate to FRM, usually called FRL, free and reduced lunch, but now it's free and reduced meals. And finally, students in your school district who identify as Hispanic or Latino of any race. So that crosswalk in achievement, participation, attendance, and discipline, we found noteworthy and interesting, and see it as a key finding. Next. We started by looking, that you're going to think this is fairly straightforward and kind of almost too matter of fact, but we wanted to understand the context within which we were looking at all this data. So we looked at demographics and wanted to make note of what the demographics in the district were telling us. So these will not come as a surprise to you, I imagine. There is limited racial and ethnic diversity. The data is not disaggregated, however, to represent all the identity groups that are listed in the Region 9 Equity and Inclusion Statement. That's not surprising for the Profile and Performance Report. Those are state disaggregated categories, but we just wanted to point that out because you make a point of noticing lots of categories of or groupings of students and identity groups. They're not all listed here, so you don't have data on all of those groups. And finally, the identity groups with the largest percentage of representation are listed in rank order. So white students, students with IEPs, students who are eligible for free and reduced meals, and students who identify as Hispanic or Latino of any race. So those were the 4 groups with the most representation. Next. So one of the areas as where disproportionalities often show up, and in fact show up in this data, is the area of chronic absenteeism, which is particularly important because of the association between absenteeism and achievement, right? And so chronic absenteeism is a student is chronically absent when they miss 10% or more of the total number of days enrolled in school. And so that's a high proportion. So here's what we noticed, that there is this disproportionality between white students and students with IEPs and students eligible for free and reduced meals. That is to say, students with IEPs and students eligible for free and reduced meals have a more than twice as great percentage of that group. There are a smaller number of students, but the percentage of them chronically absent is much higher than that of white students, for example, so white student absenteeism is 8.4%. For students with IEPs, it's 18.5%. And for students eligible for free and reduced meals, 16.9%. So that's a big difference. And a disproportionate number of the students in each of those groups is chronically absent. And then also, this was true in 2018, for the year 2018-19, there was also a disproportionality between white students and students who identify as Hispanic and Latino. Next. Suspension and expulsion is another area. Again, it's like chronic absenteeism. It's also associated, there's a correlation with achievement. If you're suspended or expelled, you're not in school. Although we do provide schooling for students, but that's why it's an area that we look at and sort of an area of concern. And there were 3 groups with notably higher rates of suspension and expulsion than other groups. And again, those were students with IEPs, students eligible for for free and reduced meals. And then the third category were males, who were almost 2.5% times higher rates than that of females for expulsions and suspensions. Next. Now, a core tenet of equity is ensuring that all students have access to opportunities. So that's evident in your policy and in your equity statement. The equity and diversity statement that you have, policy that you have, has under values, gaps in learning and opportunity are contrary to our belief that all children can learn and succeed. So one of the areas that we look at when we do an equity audit is areas of student participation, right? And we are not suggesting that because students don't participate, that they don't have the opportunity to, right? That would be jumping up the ladder of inference and making an assumption. The data is only telling us who's participating and who isn't. And so we're sort of pointing out areas that you may want to investigate further. So 2 things stand out. There was disproportionate representation in student government and in the National Honor Society. So first off, many groups of students in the school are not represented in student government. We're just noting that. And the second is all other groups are, all groups outside of white students are disproportionately underrepresented in the National Honor Society. Next. All you, Carrie.
Okay, I'm going to unmute myself here. All right. Okay, and so to continue with this particular data set, we have the participation in college and career readiness courses. And so we just want to note that this is an interesting data set because we notice that we have there's a high number of students that are represented in these college and career readiness courses, which is an asset for the district. So in 2019, 2020, 90.5% of your seniors with disabilities and 77.3% of seniors eligible for free and reduced meals were enrolled in college and career readiness courses. This is a higher percentage of student representation of these groups than of the white students. And we notice that the participation of students with disabilities and those who are eligible for free and reduced meals, both in 11th and 12th grade, and by white students in 12th grade, increased significantly in 2019 and 2020. We did note additionally that the participation of 11th grade white students did decline in those years. Okay, and so you see, this is exciting because we know that this is one of those areas that research says this is an indicator of future success, of not only graduating on time, but also persistence in college. So we did note that while there is this wonderfully high level of participation on college readiness exams, there is a disproportionality in the percentage of students meeting the benchmarks. So you have this high number of participation, which is significant, and then you have a disproportionality in terms of students who are participating meeting the benchmark. So 75% of the white students taking the exam did meet the benchmark, while only 61.5% and 50% respectively for students who identify as Hispanic or Latino of any race, and students eligible for free and reduced meals made the benchmark. And so we do see a disproportionality there of significant between the students that we've identified earlier and our white students. So this is an area that we would encourage some questions to be additionally asked. This is our academic achievement data, and this is again coming from the performance index. And what I want to just notice for you, I'm going to just go ahead. This is really hard to see, so I'm going to go ahead to the text slide. So this, the school performance index and the 12 next generation accountability indicators group students into two groups. They group you into high need students, which is defined by the state as students who are economically disadvantaged. So those would be students who qualify for free and reduced price meals. Students with disabilities, who are your students who have individualized education plans, and then your English learners. So what we noted was the difference between high need students and non-high need students. And so those are the two categories that the next generation accountability indicators look at. And so there was a notation that these high need students significantly underperformed all students in other groups. And not only were they underperforming, but that there is an outlier, that the data represented represents an outlier gap. The gap data that's represented in that index is actually a gap. There's a gap that exceeds the gap that one would find across the state. And so I want to just explain that a little bit. So the accountability index is the total percentage of point earned on all of the indicators. And so there are these 12 indicators that they're looking at. Okay, and so the size of the gap index, those score points are reported, and the difference for each district is compared to the average gap across all districts, okay, statewide. And so if the gap is more than one standard deviation beyond the state gap mean, then it's an outlier gap. And so Region 9 has an outlier gap in the data that is represented by, and it's hard to see here, that is represented with the achievement gap. Okay, so you see it with the ELA performance, math performance, and then science performance. And science performance actually has the smallest gap between the state. And so that's, I think, a significant notation. All right. And so I think this data is a little complicated, but it's significant to note that we're looking at outlier. We're looking at an outlier. We're looking at a gap that is significant enough that bears further examination. Patrice?
I always forget to unmute. So we mentioned before that we also looked at the climate survey data for April 2019. And we did that because we wanted to crosswalk. Carrie talked about triangulation. We wanted to crosswalk. And so we looked for questions on the climate survey data that were related to the areas that we just covered: participation, achievement, And I think those were the two big areas, participation and achievement. And so these were there were 5 questions that we pulled out that we wanted to particularly look at. And what we wanted to do was see if disaggregating the data by the ethnicity that students had identified when they took the survey would help us understand it, how those students were sort of responses to this, and if there seemed to be some kind of correlation between this that you could draw and the data that we just talked about, or if there were some similarities that you would want to explore further. So you can see the 5 questions on the screen. Here was our hiccup, however. When students took the survey, they could indicate all ethnicities that applied. And when we examined the numbers of of students who responded that they fit a particular ethnicity or identity group, and we'll look at some of the core ones that were on the PPR. So for example, Black or African American, Hispanic or Latino, Asian or Asian American. In a number of cases, more students responded as being a member of that group than were listed as being in that group on the profile and performance report. So that, as a result of that, we didn't see that disaggregation was going to give us any kind of valid information. So we didn't sort of explore that any further. It's another, as we will suggest later on, the opportunity to sort of look how students provide information. It is pretty interesting that you can indicate the ethnicities that apply to you. Often it's more than one. There were also a number of students who just checked all the ethnicities. And so that makes the data a little complicated. So while we couldn't look at disaggregated data, one of the things we did look at in relationship to these 5 questions was what were the percentages that answered on the scale, and what were the responses that were negative? What were the percentages of the responses that were negative? So Carrie? So for these 4 questions, which we see as related to academic achievement, we included questions related to social emotional well-being and stress, because there's a lot of research to support the relationship between that and high levels of achievement. That's become particularly true during the pandemic and across the country. And so we saw as negative, these were questions on a 5-point scale, and it was from not true to very true on the scale. We looked at a cutoff of not true and somewhat true as sort of being our quote unquote negative responses. Now you might challenge that, but that was the way we did the cutoff. And a strong finding was that most students felt that they were supported in their learning. They said they were from true to very true. So 3 of the 5 points on the scale that they were supported in their learning. So that's a pretty strong percentage. Alternatively, 25% or 1 out of 4 indicated a lack of support and assistance. So not true to sometimes true. So we're noting that. And we also talked about the connection between social emotional well-being and academic achievement. A very high percentage of students indicated high stress levels and feeling a lack of investment by the school in their emotional well-being. And we know that Joe Barlow High School focused a lot of attention on social emotional learning and this past year. But we are also noting that this was extraordinarily high. As you looked at it, you had a 10-point scale, and most of the students fell from 5 to 10, 10 being very high stress level, and 10 being the same on the second question. So we're pointing that out. So that was academic achievement. And finally, we looked at one question related to participation. Again, it's not a perfect crosswalk with National Honor Society and student government, but basically most students a very, very high percentage of students at Joel Barlow High School indicated that they participate in extracurricular activities of all the kinds that are listed in that question. However, at the same time, or I shouldn't say however, I should say at the same time, 12% of students, so 1 in 10, a little more than 1 in 10, responded that they never are involved in extracurricular activities. Just a point of participation. Carrie.
Okay, so assets to leverage. Joel Barlow High School has a few. There's a climate committee. And so this slide is really about, so we looked at the data, we had a chance to really, do a thoughtful analysis. And there are some things that stand out as opportunities and assets within the high school to leverage. And so one of the things we noted is that they have a climate committee, and it's inclusive of students and teachers and parents who analyze the climate survey data and determine areas of focus, and then they collaboratively construct the school climate action plan. And when you look at there are 5 school climate standards, some of them speak to, I think, some of the things that were brought up in the survey, in the climate survey, with regards to this notion of feeling cared for and feeling having their social emotional needs met. And so I think that this is a real asset to leverage for the community. And this plan utilizes the National School Climate Standard, which address issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, which we know has been an area of focus for Region 9 this year. And so that is definitely an asset to leverage. Region 9 and Joel Barlow High School together generate significant data that can be helpful to understand issues related to DEI. So we know that you all are just putting out more surveys, and that you have additional climate survey data from this academic school year in conjunction with the data that we've already looked at. So you have some really wonderful opportunities to determine the impact that these efforts are having on some of the academic achievement in data that we prefaced earlier. The students at Joel Barlow High School achieve at really high levels. They demonstrate significant proficiency, and they outperform the state on multiple indicators. This is a huge asset of the community. And then finally, the district equity policy, that's 0523, and the newly adopted ER9 equity and inclusion statement provide a really strong foundation and direction for the diversity, equity, and inclusion work at Joel Barlow High School going forward. So these are all wonderful assets for this community to leverage moving forward with the work.
So in the next 2 slides, I'm just going to review some opportunities you have. We shared with you what we noticed, and now we're going to say what we wonder, right? So we wondered about some things, and those point you to some opportunities for next steps. The equity audit is really an arrow pointing you toward what you can do to achieve the goals that you've already so clearly stated. So the first opportunity you have is to consider upgrading your data collection and reporting systems. When we were waiting for the Joel Barlow High School equity audit, we were told that the delays in receiving it were due to just challenges in pulling information from different sources. So as you go forward and try to collect and see what's the impact of the efforts you're making, having data readily accessible that's related to your goals for equity, diversity, and inclusion will be really important. And you have an opportunity now, because in completing this data, I know central office is acutely aware of where some of those challenges lie. So you have an opportunity to act on those, or to move forward with that information. You have the opportunity to regularly disaggregate student performance and climate data. I think that the value of disaggregation is that it will help direct you to any disproportionalities, which in turn will help you to questions to make sure that these are not opportunity and access gaps, or what's causing them. So it can point you to that, and it will help focus your DEI efforts. And I noted in there, again, some wording that was from the equity policy that Carrie talked about. We would encourage you to use this report as a starting point, as I'm repeating myself, but to do a more comprehensive cycle of inquiry. An equity audit is generally the first step, and then you have to dig deeper to actually get to the cause. What do we need to know to really understand the outcomes that we saw? We can make some assumptions. Remember, humans make meaning out of data, but we first would suggest questions. What do we really need to know? And then what other additional data will help us understand it better, particularly in relation to those 3 groups of students that we pointed out for the key finding number 1. Carrie? You have a lot of structures and practices in place, and you have opportunities to consider creating other structures and practices that will provide staff and administration and groups like the DEI Advisory Committee the opportunity to monitor access, opportunities, experiences, and outcomes. So you'll be able to get reports on the impact of the work that you're doing and address any disproportionalities that come up. A lot of school districts, when they do an equity audit, then see where are the places where we can continually monitor our efforts moving forward. I do encourage we encourage every school district, and Joe Barlow is no different, or Region 9 is no different, to include disaggregation. And we noted that you have a number of identity groups in your district definition of diversity and in the district policy. This existed, that are not included in disaggregation. So there's an opportunity to include them to see if there are any disproportionalities. It doesn't make things simpler, actually, but we're just saying you have an opportunity with that. And finally, all of the places where we made noticings or where we noticed disproportionalities are places that are noticed in districts across Connecticut and across the country. So there are best practices suggested in those areas and arrows pointing to places for further inquiry. And so we encourage you to consider using that research and those identified best practices to determine policies and practices in relation to those disproportionalities that we talked about. So those are your strategic opportunities. Carrie?
And finally, we just want to bring you back to another quote from a book that we have found incredibly helpful in supporting us as we conduct these equity audits, which is that to increase your equity, and we've added the language of diversity and inclusion because it's the language that you've been using, that increasing this muscle is going to require continuous nurturing and attention, right? It's this idea that you have an opportunity, just as Patrice said, that to engage in a continuous monitoring process, an ongoing cycle of collection and disaggregation and analysis of data to really understand some of the things that are going on, the strengths and some of the challenges that you face in bringing all students up. And so keeping, looking at your programs and practices and keeping current with the literature, updating the skill set of everyone who is responsible for supporting the very best of our students, and just engaging in an authentic dialogue is the thing that is going to keep this work moving forward and is going to give you the greatest leverage of all, which is information, so that you can do right by all of the students, as you so clearly state in your values and your equity and diversity policy. And so we just want to sort of end on that note, that this is really just an opportunity for you to begin, and you have a lot to work with. And it's been a pleasure for us to have the opportunity to get it started. And so that is the end of our presentation. I'm just going to stop the share. And Rydell, I guess pass it over back to you, Dr. Harrison.
Thank you guys very much. I appreciate you guys going through the slides and going through the data. Of course, we had an opportunity to see this earlier, but really wanted the chance for the board to get the first pass at this part one. And Todd, I'm happy to open it to questions if if board members have any questions or comments.
Yeah, I'll see Mike's hand.
So first, I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to move to add a discussion and possible action item to the agenda to review a presentation from the Connecticut Center for School Change related to preliminary data collected from Part 1 of the Region 9 Equity Audit.
Well, there's a motion on the floor to add this to the agenda.
I'll second, Cheryl.
Thank you. We've got a motion that's been seconded. Any other discussion?
I just feel like this has gone beyond a report, and it's definitely an agenda item that we should have on the agenda.
Yeah, and I'm happy if we move it to the agenda. If Carrie and Patrice, if you would stay on so we can ask questions. It's a very thorough report, and I'm sure board members have lots of questions around it. All right, no other conversation with board members, then we'll, and Mike, is there any place in particular you want this item moved on the agenda?
Yes, in the middle of administrative reports, if possible.
So you want to leave it where it's at as a discussion and possible action? No, I think we're going to move it down to the discussion section. Is that where your motion is?
That's your call, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I don't think we have too many other reports. So, can we move it then to the, can we put it at the top of the pile on discussion and possible action?
I'm fine with that.
Get
Yes.
it out of administrative reports so we can have
Yes,
the
yes.
conversation. All right. So we're gonna, the motion is to move this reporting into discussion possible action item in 7 as the new item A. Just to be clear on the motion. All right. All in favor? Moving it. Aye. Moving around. All opposed. Looks like it carried. Karen, did you? I didn't see your vote. You're on mute.
Vote yes, sorry.
Okay. All right. So it's unanimous. So we'll move it to the new item A, and more of a procedural thing, just so we can have a conversation around it outside of the administrative report. There's again a lot of good information in there. I'm sure the board would like to ask some questions. All right. So with that, then can we move on to other administrative reports? I think there were a couple others in the pack there. We had finance ones in there.
Mr. Chair, some of my, the health report and the budget average summary could be tied into the later discussion about unspent funds. So I don't want to, if you want to do the transfer now, we can do the transfers. They're real easy. The other ones tie into what we're discussing later. So I'll defer those to later to save you time.
Perfect. That sounds good. That'll get us down to the discussion possible action faster. I appreciate that. So you want to go through transfers really quickly?
If you want, it's you know,
Yep, no, that sounds
really
good.
dramatic there for me, but it's, you know, if you want to have questions. In aggregate, we transferred just under $7,300. There was one big 3,000 one for online learning increase. There's another big one for chemical textbooks, additional funds, but sort of straightforward. If you want to go into details, we can, but there's nothing what I would call unusual or out of the norm in the transfers. As you noted before, we start adding the description of what the transfer is for there, so it's sort of self-explanatory. Given that, you know, you've got a full agenda.
Yep. Oh, no, I appreciate that. All right, board members, any questions on the transfers? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on. So we'll do health claims as well as object summary later.
They tie into the unspent funds. So.
Yep. Okay, so we'll hold those.
Yep.
Very good. All right. Any other administrative reports? All right. Seeing none, then we'll move to committee reports. And I think, Cheryl, you had one for curriculum.
This is more of an informational, so the curriculum committee met, I don't remember what it was, a couple months ago, but we last met, and one of the items for discussion was just to get an update. The committee asked for an update from the administration with respect to the summer reading list. So the administration had come back with a written report that's been circulated to the board in advance of this meeting and is also posted in the public materials for the public. But essentially, I'm not going to go through the report, but in summary, and I don't know if anyone from the administration is on, I don't think so. But if they are, feel free to comment, and Dr. Harrison, Dr. Pearson, please comment as well. But the gist of the report that was sent to the board is essentially that the administration essentially provides choice to our students to choose what to select in the rating list. So there's a long addendum to it, and some of it's traditionally, items that we have recommended over the years that, known literary works that have been around for a long time that are on those lists. And in addition, there's been a larger, I think, list of choice that are recommendations from the libraries, et cetera. So the bottom line is there are some changes year over year in terms of what has been recommended in past years, but the same token, we didn't want to necessarily restrict students to reading a certain group. So there's enough choice for our students to make. So if there are any other questions, I think I would just direct the board to take a look at the report. If there are any questions, feel free to direct them to me, and I'm happy to filter them over to the team, or we can certainly direct them to the staff as appropriate.
And the reading lists are posted now on the
Yes, they
site,
are. Yep.
on the school site. All right, any board member question or comment around the summer reading list? Okay, very good. Thank you, Cheryl. Any other committee reports, Cheryl? Just trying to, any other committee reports from any of the other board members? It's a blur. We've had so many meetings.
Todd, I'll just say the audit committee met in May, and one of the items on discussion possible action is output from that committee meeting.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. All right. No other committee reports for board members. All right. Then we will move on to discussion possible action, item 7 on the agenda in the new item A. So discussion around the Joe Barlow High School Equity Audit from the Connecticut Center for School Change. So we'll now open it up again to discussion, and thank you for going through the procedural matter with us. Appreciate that, Patricia and Carrie. So I'll open it up at this time for any board member questions. Cheryl, go ahead.
So just first of all, thank you to the administration and the Center for School Change for a very thorough report. It was very, very helpful. So thank you for that. I know looking at some of the demographic groups that were identified in the, required by the state categories. I noticed that one of them was, we wanted to protect the identities of those respondents. So I understand that we couldn't necessarily analyze the demographics, but there were 2 other groups. I think one was Asian and more than one race. So anything that came out of those, I know we focused on Hispanic and Latino, as well as those who had IEPs. And so just any findings from that or recommendations with respect to those groups. So there are 2 slides, 10 and 11, that didn't reference any findings in particular, but they did cite that there were enough respondents. So I don't know if there were any observations, even anecdotally, that from the equity audit.
Sorry, go ahead and unmute. Carrie.
So there were not, because we were looking for really large disproportionalities in terms of the percentage of students in the school and a percentage on something. And often when it came to performance, there were so few students that they didn't give us any data on it. So that was part of the problem in those areas. We did notice, for example, in terms of student government participation. So when it came to, and I want to pull out my data source a little bit more. The statements that we made were in fact true, but for example, in terms of participation in student government, for 1 year there was no participation of Asian students or and only one multiracial student who participated. So that was it still fit into the category of there was disproportionality between all other groups and white students. So there was just not as much, there was just not. So to answer your question, no, there wasn't anything that stood out particularly. And a lot of it was because we didn't have a whole lot of data.
Yeah, and I would just add one other thing, which is that actually on the school profile and performance report, there are a couple of areas where Asian students aren't represented. They're not categorically represented. And so, you know, I think in part of our so part of that is like in the chronic absenteeism and the suspension data. And then again, in the college and career readiness courses, the category, while we know it exists because we have your demographic data, it's not fleshed out in those two areas. And so as part of the opportunity to look at your site-based data sources, you have a better opportunity to disaggregate and discover whether or not there are disproportionalities for the groups that are not necessarily represented on the profile or performance report. It's a great question, Cheryl. Thank you for asking that.
Great, and just to follow up on that again, I know, again, the Black African-American students were, again, numbers are so small, so we need to protect our identities. But just in general, anecdotally through the focus groups in particular, and again, that's much smaller sample size. I know we can't extrapolate and it's anecdotal, but any themes there? And the reason why I ask is because, you know, the board has received probably within the last year, isolated cases where there are incidents where children are perhaps being marginalized for one reason or another, that we're not capturing that demographic data either because we can or we're limited. So is there anything that you can share with protecting the students that came out in those focus groups?
So one of the issues that we had with one of the things that we didn't do with the focus groups, and I think it was just a matter of time in getting the data, is we did not ask how students identify. So we were in focus groups and we, again, did not make assumptions about a student's identity. We had hoped to have just an aggregate, that is to say, using student records, could someone do, you know, say what was the proportion of students that we interviewed who were in each of the disaggregated categories. I think because of the timing and the demands on the office and everyone else, especially because of COVID, it was hard to get that data. We didn't, the same was true of teachers, of parents, of I think, and administration. We did not disaggregate the data. So we don't have any responses that way. In terms of themes in the responses, Carrie and I are still going through the data to be able to say what were the themes about the student experience in Joel Barlow High School from students' perspective, parents' perspective, teachers' perspectives. And that's what will be in the second part of the report. I'm not trying to put you off, but I don't want to misspeak. And we're really clear about not using anything that sort of rose in our head. We want to have it actually in the data that we can look at the quotes and capture it from that way.
Okay, thank you.
What I would say is the climate study data was really interesting.
Yeah.
If the data hadn't been so questionable in terms of ethnicity, there were some disproportionalities as in relationship to the groups that you talked about in relationship to those questions, but I can't trust the numbers and the way that I was associating a response to an ethnicity, because often someone would put 4 ethnicities down. And so it was hard for me to know. But when I tried to just look at people who responded with one identity grouping, so Asian American or Asian, Black or African American, there were some disproportionalities in responses to that in the negative piece. But again, don't really trust the data and it needs further inquiry.
Actually, this question is for Stephanie. Stephanie, how many students approximately participate in student government that are on student government, actually?
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I want to say it's a very low number. So if you're talking about the elected officers, I want to say 4, but actually Patrice and Carrie probably have that information in front of them.
Yeah, it's on page 13 of their data from 2018, 2019.
Yeah, and
Like
so
21 out of 875 people.
Well, why would
participating
you
in
use
student government.
that as one of your data points then? I'm just curious, why would that, it's such a small number.
You know, it's a participation point that a lot of high school principals who do equity audits take a look at. It's only because in all high schools, a small number of the student body participates in student government. But it's just a question to ask. So there's no negative, I mean, we're curious that you have a representative student body, right, of students of different groups, and white students disproportionately are represented in student government. So you're right, it's not a huge number of students, but we're just pointing out that even within that small group, there's a disproportionality, and it's about student
Is it really
government. and student voice.
disproportionate though, if the majority of the students are white students? I mean, I'm just saying that it just seems like that's a really skewed number to even use. That just that particular thing really stood out as being not really valid, even as a data point. Even though other schools use it, in our instance, it doesn't seem like that would be worth even pulling it out as a separate data point.
So Karen, one way I look at this is, so we're talking 21 students. So of those 21 students, and looking at sort of how that breaks down across ethnicity and racial groups. What makes student government a really good indicator in looking at this work, and I've done this in other districts and other schools, the benefit of it is that it's the one area where it's not just about participation, but it's also representative of those are students who are typically voted into those positions, into office. And so it gives sort of a peek into, it can give a peek into what the student experiences are, and really looking at who are seen as representatives of the larger student body. So it's, I think to Carrie and Patrice's point, it's nothing sort of magical about why look at that, but it's just of the data points that are things that you typically dig into to give you a picture of what's happening across the school or across the district. It is one of the areas that's useful, and just something that to kind of keep an eye on, and then ask some additional questions, right? Because all of these data points are kind of starting points for further discussion, rather than saying, well, let's make a bunch of assumptions as to why that is. It would be really interesting to ask some students some additional questions about, so how does that work? Why is that the case?
I can appreciate that, but I think in our case, in our school, it probably is more of a question of those are the only kids that'll run for the office. I think the offices are actually hard to fill, and that's more the problem, not as so much as it is, having an abundance of riches, shall we say, and having a whole lot of kids to choose from. I think it's really just the kids that'll step up to the plate. That's maybe my assumption.
And I guess a follow-up is the National Honor Society. Is that a similar kind of thing, Dr. Harrison or Patrice, Carrie, why we pick that as the other data set? Because that's like 25 kids on 875 kids. So is that the same kind of logic why we pick that?
Mm-hmm. The other reason for the National Honor Society is often, so that is not a volunteer. You don't sort of say, I want to be in the National Honor Society. You're nominated into it, right? And so sometimes that's a window into gates, like places where the system has a policy or a practice, maybe not even a formal policy, some kind of practice that limits access. I'm not saying that happened at Joel Barlow High School. It's just that it has certainly shown up in other high schools. where a part of the process might be the teacher nomination or or opportunities for certain kinds of courses before. And again, we didn't go down all of the road to sort of understand that, but the National Honor Society is one of those, and is also one where, again, a number of high schools across the country, across Connecticut, are particularly interested in that, to sort of try to understand, are there some barriers to access to that unwittingly are built into the system that may start early on, like may start in first or second grade. And that's been an opportunity to examine that further in districts across the country. Even though, again, it's a small portion of students.
Yeah, I see Mary Lee's. I have a follow-up, but go ahead, Mary Lee.
Oh, go ahead, Todd, with your follow-up on that one.
Well, again, are we going to do the next step? Because again, like National Honor Society, I hear what you're saying, but I mean, there are other criteria that students have to meet to get into that, because it is selective. So it's not just the reference letters that you mentioned, there are grades and other things. So my question is, are there other follow-ups being done to help us determine kind of what's the root cause of the lower participation of the underrepresented groups?
I mean, that's a decision that you all have to make, and it's a decision to try. So that sort of came with one of our strategic opportunities. That's sort of to say, so let's look at our process. Is there anything in our process, in the process for the National Honor Society here, that would limit access to people from different groups? Is there any reason that, so for example, there are no, in 2000, this 1819, there were no Asian students who were members of the National Honor Society. There were no Black or African American students. There were 2 students who identified as Hispanic or Latinx, and there was 1 multiracial student. But those are disproportionate numbers, right? If you have a certain number of Asian students and not one, not even a small percentage is in there. So it's just a question to ask, what is, maybe it's not something that interests you, but we're pointing it out as something that showed up to us.
Right. I mean, so the equity audit really is just, it's an opportunity for you to say, so what piques our interest? What questions are you generating as a result of looking at the equity audit? Because like we said, data has no answers, but it does lead you to ask more questions. And you're doing just that tonight, which is exactly the point, which is great.
Yeah, I share some of your concerns about the data set as a whole that was used, right, that you mentioned earlier, because it's 875 students back in 2018, 2019, 734 of them were white, so that's 84% of the population, and only 0.03% made it into the National Honor Society. So I mean,
That's
again,
right.
it's a very small portion of a very selected area, but I am curious again why we didn't get other students in there from the other groups. So that is something we'd like to take a look at. Sorry, I'll stop asking questions, Mary Lee. You had a question. You've been very patient. Thank you.
No, that's fine. No, I have actually 2 questions. And one, I was confused why in the separation of the data, there was the category of students with disabilities, students on free or reduced meals, and then various racial and ethnic backgrounds, and then white students. Wasn't there any crossover? We've got white students who have disabilities. We have white students who are on free and reduced meals. So that honestly kind of, how are we going to, really get to the root of things if we're lumping them into those categories and not breaking them down even more?
Exactly.
And so that's part one. So, why was that done like that?
Because that's the way the data is presented. And so for the district to get that other data to break down those groups, that's a little bit more of a challenge. It's not the way it's purported in the PPR. So we, again, data is just data. My assumption is in those two groups, there are lots of different racial groups, racial identity groups represented in the students with IEPs and in the students with who are eligible for free and reduced meals. It would be interesting. I mean, people sometimes jump to conclusions about that in much more diverse districts, right? That, oh, you know, our heads may go to a certain place. It'd be interesting to see here. It could well be that all of the students who are eligible for free and reduced price meals would be racially identified as white. And so I don't know, right? It would be really.
So that wasn't in the data that
we.
we provided to you? You couldn't extract that from the data that we have given to you or that you got from us?
So one of the things that's, yeah, Stephanie, you can talk to this, or Dr. Harrison, you can talk to it, but that data of students who qualify for free and reduced meals is not public data. That's not data that I would have access to. Stephanie, I don't know, or
yeah, I could speak to that. Go ahead, Stephanie. I'm sorry.
It's just, this is, that data set in particular is highly confidential, and there are very few people in central office who even may access that information, and parents need to expressly provide permission for that information to be released, even, for instance, to receive financial support, say, to take a standardized measure. So the information that's provided by the state, you're hearing about the performance profile, that's information that's provided by the state. So it's in the aggregate. And so it's not broken down.
And if I can add to that, there's probably only 2 people in all of central office that have access to that information. I'm one of them. So there's no way the center would have had access. That Dr. Harrison doesn't even have access to that. So they wouldn't have seen that information.
All right, thank you. Thanks. And the second question is, you housed in the, or outlined in the opportunities about research and identifying best practices. Is that coming in part 2?
You know, so that's a really, in part 2, we're really going to give you a lot of themes and crosswalks between data sets. So, and we're going to add the focus group data to that. That's a lot more. We didn't finish the focus groups and interviews until, I think it was I felt like it was last week, but maybe it was the week before that.
Close, yeah.
I'm not going to be able to give you a really good answer for that. Sometimes the research and best practices come as you go more deeply into the data. If you just looked at the research and best practices and said, oh, a lot of schools are doing this, let's do this, you may not be addressing the actual issue that's at hand in Joel Barlow High School. So that research can help you figure out, oh, where might we sort of look more deeply? If you're asking us what other questions could we ask that we could really, to understand the data better, we can certainly include some questions like that in the focus group information. But to point you to a solution without really knowing the root cause would be doing a disservice.
I thought you were going through the equity audit so that you come up with root causes and then you can provide some research to point us in a direction to, help us out.
So the answer, with the level of this equity audit, it's giving you one level of information, and that information just needs to be unpacked further and further. So when we've worked with groups, other districts over a longer period of time, they've done an initial equity audit, and then groups within the district, sometimes it's a guiding coalition, sometimes it's the administrative council, sometimes it's a particular school, will dive more deeply into the data to try to unpack it to get to root cause. So what we do in those cases is help support them as they're doing that work, but they're doing that work.
Okay, thank you.
Mike?
Okay. First, I do appreciate the thoroughness of the report, of the data collection process. And I also am fully aware that the board has been very much, phone rings when you're on. So anyway, I'm also fully aware that the board has been asking for reports relating to the progress, you know, of this work. But I do wonder whether, you know, I guess my hope was that we would collect data and then we would do a more thorough job, maybe working with the administration to disaggregate the data before we presented it. Because quite frankly, some of the data, you know, we've already pointed out tonight that sample sizes, that, you know, there's certain flaws with the, or potential flaws with the assumptions that one would draw based upon the presentation in the slides. And for example, I know Mary Lee did point out the category where we have students with disabilities, with English language learners, with, you know, students who receive free meals. But also when we look at this achievement gap and we say that there's a larger achievement gap between students with disabilities and that group than the general population, I think you have to take the next step to find out why that may be the case. There could be students with severe needs that's pool size could be smaller. It's, in other words, how are our students with disabilities performing in comparison with, you know, the state overall, rather than comparing just that gap between the higher performing students and the students with disabilities? Because it's very easy to draw the assumption to say that we're not doing well with our students with disabilities, and I don't think that is the case. I think the slide can you know, cause false assumptions to occur, and that's why I think that it would be helpful, I think, to do a more thorough job, maybe working with the administration and the staff to disaggregate a lot of this data before it's presented publicly, so that we can ask the important questions, right? That you're saying. We can unpack it, but I think it's easier to unpack it once we've kind of narrowed it down to actually know what it is we should be questioning, and, you know, from the things that we really don't know because of either the sample size or the way the data was collected or the way we're categorizing it.
So Mike, if I can respond to that. So what I wanted Carrie and Patrice to be able to do is just to give some just initial findings from this first pass at the data. When they're referencing the PPR, the profile and performance report, and we're talking about that gap with students with IEPs and other students, those data are already public. So that comes from our accountability index, which is already on the school report card, and in typical years that is reported out annually. I do think that what the intention of this report and sharing it here, but more specifically sharing this information with administration, is to be able to say, okay, so that gives us kind of the first pass. Now let's dig in and let's look a little bit deeper at that. Like what is going on? Because that's where we're able to look specifically at some of our programming. And when while the performance for the PPR, that report shows students with IEPs, we know who those students are. And so that's then sitting with the administration, and let's unpack who are the students that are showing up in this data, and what are some of the unique circumstances that we want to dig into a little bit deeper to identify what do some of our next steps look like. That's a pretty involved process, and you know, if we were waiting for that level of analysis, I mean, that's ongoing analysis, right? So that's going to carry us well into next year as far as really digging in deeper and continuing to unpack that work. I didn't want us to not have any sort of information of what's the methods that we've been using to do this analysis, what's the work look like. So this is really just kind of a step along the way for work that will absolutely be ongoing.
Joe?
So a follow-up, thanks that context, the question and the response was helpful. But to follow up with the response with respect to timetables. So what, you know, in terms of just board expectation, like I did feel that some of the preliminary information was helpful and the context was helpful, but what would next steps be potentially with respect to the work that the Climate for School Change is doing for the district versus what the district is going to internalize and then determine what the action plan would be. And then again, at some point as appropriate, Todd, Rydell, Stephanie, I'd probably recommend perhaps an interim when the administration is ready, a kind of next step report out to the board. So I guess just to reiterate my question, I
don't have the answer to your question.
Any sense of timetable or what are next steps and when? And again, just not looking for definitive dates, just directional. I mean, is phase 2 of the focus groups? I think the Climate for School Change indicated that they'd be analyzing that data. So what would the timetable for sharing that with the board be? And then, you know, any action steps, again, directionally that perhaps the administration may or may not take. Right, but just analyzing that data and just 6 months, 3 months, just trying to get a sense.
So just in terms of, go ahead. Just in terms of part 2, we're under contract until June 30th. So you will have the report by June 30th. And we know that doesn't correspond to a board meeting. Carrie and I then looked at your upcoming board meetings and we're not available at some of the subsequent board meetings right away, but you will have the report. And then if you want us to come back and talk to it, that's certainly something that we can do. But the report will be finished for part 2, all of the things in this slide that said part 2 by June 30th. And Dr. Harrison will have it.
And Cheryl, I think that part of our next steps has been taking that data from part 2 and then doing our analysis work that we already have planned for the broader DEI survey that we're doing, and really looking at those pieces together. And I see that coming back in front of the boards as a presentation early fall. So I don't know. I don't want to give a month. September sounds like it makes sense because I think it's going to naturally come from work that we're already doing as far as some of those next steps with the analysis.
And so we'll get this board will get the part 2 information at some point after you receive it. Dr. Harrison had a chance to look at it.
Yes.
Okay. And just to be clear, that's got the focus groups, that information will be synthesized in the part 2, since this was all the other
That's
data
right.
and so forth.
That's
yeah.
right.
Okay.
And
okay.
yeah, and subsequent climate survey data from the previous year, although again, we did have the issue with being able to disaggregate it. And so
okay.
we can still utilize that data.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, board members, any other questions? We'll wrap this part up. So again, thank you, Carrie and Patrice. Appreciate you presenting and then hanging on for some questions. Very, very thorough report. We do appreciate it. And we look forward to the second part coming up here. So thank you again
Absolutely.
for your time
You
and
asked
all your
some
hard work on
wonderful
it.
questions. Your questions were that's exactly the point. And so well done.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Thank you. All right, we will now move on to discussion possible action item B, the new B, recognition of retiring faculty. And I don't have the list, so I don't know if Dr. Harrison or Dr. Pearson-Ugal, or we may table this one. I know they were recognized at graduation, but I don't actually have the actual list with me. So
I do not have my graduation list with me. Dr. Harrison, do you have the list?
and I'm embarrassed I don't have it with me.
I don't have that list
Oh,
either.
my apologies. I thought we had a member of the school administration. We can
We-
certainly recognize them appropriately at our next meeting.
Yes, I think we will do that. All right, so I'm going to table that and put it to our next meeting because we do want to recognize them, and they were recognized in at graduation, and quite a few people retiring with a lot of years of service to the district. So we do want to recognize them appropriately. So we'll move on then to item C, approval of chemistry textbook. And I'm not sure if Dr. Pearson-Ugal or Cheryl, I'm not sure who wants to present this. We had the book to read, and we have a handout on summary of it and costs.
I could take that one. I have a draft motion so just to recap for purposes of the board and the public. We last spoke at our last Region 9 meeting with respect to a chemistry textbook. Again, the summary is included in the materials that have been distributed to the board ahead of time, as well as posted in public materials. But the administration recommended or reviewed the chemistry textbook with the curriculum committee of the Region 9 board, and the Region 9 board then recommended it to the Region 9 board for approval and adoption last meeting. But we are required to provide second notice. So this is essentially, provide an opportunity to review that and then formally approve it. So I'd like to move in conjunction with that. I'm going to pull up this motion that the Region 9 Board of Education approved to adopt introductory chemistry for the 2021-2022 school year and beyond for classroom use in accordance with Region 9 Board Policy 6161.
Second.
Any further discussion? So this is introductory to chemistry. Is it Tro is the author, 6th edition?
Yes.
For a total, I think there's a total cost of $28,084.97, I think is what's on the summary.
Correct.
Okay. And 180 textbooks, just for the record, for people at home. All right.
And this is the textbook that was recommended by administration, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
So do we have that in the motion, or did you want to put it in the motion?
I could amend the motion if
We all reviewed it too already.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
I read it, Cheryl read it.
Curriculum committee
You
recommended.
don't
it.
have to. I just thought it would be important for the public to know that this is the administrative recommendation as well. It's just, I don't know that you need to amend the motion.
So noted now. We'll have it in the minutes.
It was an excellent book.
All right. Any other discussion? All right. So we have a motion on the floor to approve the introductory chemistry textbook as recommended by administration. All in favor? All opposed? All right. Seeing none, it carries unanimously. All right. So with that, then we will move on to the new item D, possible solar map project for JBHS. So, Mr. Zachary.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I was stirring my tea.
Oh, sorry, we're up for the solar project.
All right, so I'm
like to
going
tee that up for us.
I have some guests who've been patiently waiting for us. Mackie Dykes, I see. I'm looking for Emily.
She's on as well.
Yeah. So they're gonna do a brief presentation. I got so Emily, I don't know who's got the presentation, but we need to give them a chance, opportunity to share their screen, Mr. Chair.
Yes. Who's presenting?
I think
Emily's presenting. Okay. I will make you.
Emily should be
Yep,
one.
Emily.
Yep.
Got it. All right. I should be a co-host now.
So Emily, if you can introduce your team, please, I'd appreciate it.
Yes. All right, can you guys see the slides?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Good evening, everyone. I'm Emily Basham from the Connecticut Green Bank, and I'm joined by my colleague Mackie Dykes and Alan Sabins. This evening, we're talking about our Solar MAP program, the Solar Municipal Assistance Program. We've been working with Clarence's office and the towns of Easton and Reading to look at opportunities for solar projects. And tonight we've got kind of the preliminary findings of our analysis to share with the regional board. So with that, I'll jump in, introduce who we are and what the program is and what we've looked at so far. So the Solar MAP program is a program of the Connecticut Green Bank where myself and Mackie work. The Connecticut Green Bank, if you're not familiar, is a quasi-public state agency. We were created by the legislature in 2011 to provide financing for clean energy projects to help the state meet our clean energy goals. CSW Energy, where Alan Sabins is from, is our technical partner for the program. They have a lot of experience working with municipalities to develop solar PV projects. So they're our technical eyes for this program. Essentially, the Green Bank has been providing financing for clean energy projects since our inception. We've worked a lot with boards of ed and municipalities to finance projects using our power purchase agreement. And through that work, we know that it's a lot to look at solar projects, identify where good opportunities are, and get the legwork to understand the best option to move forward. So that's why we created the Solar Municipal Assistance Program, not only to be a trusted finance partner for our towns and cities, but also to provide kind of the technical support and project development support early on in the process, looking at municipal sites to understand where the opportunities are. So we created this program a couple of years ago to just provide, simplicity to this process. So in a nutshell, what we do and what we've done so far is, meet with towns. We've talked with the town of Reading and town of Easton to look at all of the municipally owned sites. We do an analysis to understand where the opportunities are to do on-site installations of solar. We review the energy demand at those sites and develop preliminary system designs, which kind of include a project concept, what that PPA looks like, and the generation that would come from that system. So that's where we're at in Easton and Reading. We've developed a short list of solar projects that would be great opportunities for saving money. And one of those sites is Joel Barlow School. So we're here to present on the project concept we've developed so far, looking for your support to move forward, further developing that project. And that would mean moving to step 3, we secure the incentives that are available for these projects. And then we also run an RFP process. So we competitively select a construction partner to actually build the system.
one of the main benefits of this program is that we are working with other municipalities across the state along the same kind of development timeline. So we would actually include Joe Barlow and any other towns that we're working with, all of those projects together into one RFP. So we would bundle those projects. We have a larger portfolio of projects to put out to bid. And that way we can get really attractive construction pricing, which helps us deliver a very competitive power purchase agreement rate. And so those two pieces have yet to be locked in, and they're also very helpful, very indicative of giving us what the power purchase agreement rate would be. So those are unknowns for us. And once we move forward with those steps, we would be able to kind of return back to the board, all of the boards, and deliver kind of final project numbers, final project design to propose as a firm project. This whole process is about a year, and we're halfway through just kind of looking at the opportunities, identifying them, putting them in as a concept and developing them. So we would look to actually return to the board with a final project concept in the fall, looking to actually move forward, signing paperwork at the end of the calendar year should the board move forward, and these projects would actually look to be installed in Q1 of 2022. Just want to take a couple minutes to go over what a power purchase agreement is. There's a lot of different options for how you can go solar. So with the Green Bank's power purchase agreement, the town is not actually, board is not actually purchasing the system and owning the system. And this arrangement, the Connecticut Green Bank and our investment partners would own the system. And through the agreement, the board would be purchasing the electricity that comes off of these panels. It's a price per kilowatt hour. And Green Bank, as the owner, we're overseeing this development process. We'd oversee construction, and then we would manage that asset for the lifetime of the system. So all in all, the town would just be purchasing kind of the green power that is coming off of the system, replacing your grid power. Just want to highlight a couple of benefits of using a power purchase agreement. The real benefit is that we would be offering you a power purchase agreement rate that is lower than your utility rate. So that solar power that you would buy that's coming off of the panels would be cheaper power than grid power. And that's, the real motivation is that energy savings. But there's a couple of other benefits to using a power purchase agreement that are worth mentioning. Because we're the owner of these systems, we're responsible for maintaining them. Any repairs that are needed over the life of the system are our responsibility. Since we are recouping our costs from those PPA payments, we want to make sure the systems are producing as efficiently as possible. And we're monitoring that system over the life of it. There are some pretty rich federal tax credits that are available for solar projects, but they're not available for municipalities since you all don't pay federal taxes. And so the Connecticut Green Bank is actually able to capture those credits, monetize them, and pass those benefits along through that reduced solar power rate. And as you see here on the graphic, the PPA rate that we offer is a fixed rate. So over 20 years, the rate that we proposed later this fall would be that same rate for the next 20 years. Meaning as over time, as utility rates increase, your savings would just continue to increase as well. As I mentioned, we have extensive experience working with municipalities as their trusted partner to provide financing for systems. Last year, we worked with 5 towns to use the Solar Map program. It's a newer program. All in all, we developed 16 projects as our first cohort of projects. It was about 3.5 megawatts of solar. And through this kind of aggregation process of bundling towns together, putting projects into one RFP, we were able to lock in discounts of 22% to 59% of a discount to the current utility rate. So we're really happy with that. The discount we were able to provide by grouping all of these projects together. And this year we're working with a little bit larger group of towns and projects that we're looking to participate in this year's cohort. So we've scoped at Joel Barlow just at a high level, and we can take any questions.
Mr. Chair, if I can give some background. The first select woman of Reading started the conversation with the Connecticut Green Bank. They identified some municipal buildings that didn't sort of meet their criteria. So she asked them to reach out to the boards of ed. You all are a separate board of ed. We've had a conversation with the Reading Board of Ed last week. There's a conversation going on with Easton. So the point of this, there's a project list that we're trying to get this on. There's no commitment to proceed, but if you're not on the list, you can't proceed. So the point here is to give you all some information about the proposal to see if you'd be willing for us to proceed to get on the list, excuse me, to allow us to continue evaluating the options that are available. And as Emily pointed out, there are significant financial incentives that are available that if you're not on that list, you can't participate in. So the town is behind this. You all, as you know, are in a unique situation that you're in a building, you're your own board of finance, but all the bills for the Joe Barlow and other schools in town are actually listed to the town of Reading. So that's why the town's involved in this sort of exercise, and we're coming to you all to see if you all are okay with us just pursuing further investigation. There's no commitment to proceed, but just we need to get on that list. So that's what the ask is, so to speak.
Are there more slides to share, Emily, or we'll take the share down and we can have conversation, or
yeah,
if you've got
yes, Mr. Chairman, this is Mackie Dykes. I can run it very quickly through.
Okay, no, that's all right. No, I just want to make sure if we were just going to look for a motion and start discussion.
Mackie's going to talk numbers.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And is the blue here, sorry, is the blue representing where panels would go on this picture?
That is exactly right. So,
okay, thank you.
First off, my name is Mackie Dykes. I'm the Vice President of Financing Programs at the Green Bank. So what you're looking at here is a proposed system, which the visual, you're right, the blue dots represent proposed solar panels. So as you can tell, we've done site visits. We've got some preliminary roof information from Clarence. We think these are the most suitable areas to put a solar system. Certainly much further due diligence would go into roof structural reviews, things like that, before an installation actually occurred. And also I know there's a facility sort of check going on, or a facility assessment that will nail down roof ages so we can make sure there's plenty of remaining life in place for any roof that we would put solar on. These are PPAs are typically 20-year agreements, so you want a relatively new roof because you don't want to you don't have to re-roof anytime one of those solar panels are on there. So the right's the visual. I'll point just to some of the key numbers here on the left. The size is just over 1,000 kilowatts. It's a pretty sizable system. If you were to put this on the ground, driving around probably up in Massachusetts, most likely you've seen a lot of those systems that are ground mounted. So it'd be about 2.5 acres for a system of that size. So fairly decent size. You use a lot of electricity at this site. All this solar power in aggregate would not cover, but we estimate it'll cover about 84% of the annual usage of the building. So we look at over the year, how much would we estimate the system would produce? We compare that to the annual usage of the building, and we're looking at about 85%. So, a fairly significant power user here. You currently pay 10.5 cents for electricity from the utility. That's all in. That's your actual generation, your electricity price. As I'm sure you're all familiar from your bills, there's a lot of other charges on top of just the generation. So we did an analysis of your bill and looked at everything that's billed per kilowatt hour, with your transmission, delivery, as I mentioned, the actual electricity. Next slide. So we don't, Emily talked about how a PPA works, which is you buy the power from us, from the solar system at a cheaper rate than that 10.5 cent power you get from the utility. We don't know what the PPA rate would be yet, because the key input in that is what that actually costs to build the system. We won't know that until we do an RFP, but we wouldn't ask you to continue to move forward without some sense of whether we think we can deliver savings. We've done hundreds of these projects around the state. We have a good sense of what it should cost to build one. So we take some conservative assumptions around those build costs and just make sure we could expect to deliver at least, in this case, we did a 15% discount, which you saw the numbers from the last round. The minimum discount to electricity price we delivered was 22%, but just being conservative, what would it look like if that RFP resulted in a 15% discount? And that's what you see here. So over the term, you're saving almost $1 million, $950,000. That's the 20-year term. The first year, you're saving $21,000, and then average over the term would be just under $50,000 per year. Why is that number bigger than the first year savings? That's because we expect over 20 years, your utility rate is not going to stay the same. We all know those tend to over time go up. So we've built in what we think is a conservative escalation factor on that utility price of 2%. But the PPA rate will stay fixed. So, again, in this case, we're looking at just under 9 cents. Most likely with a system of this size, it'll be a lot less than that. But again, just wanted to present some sort of preliminary estimate of what the savings would look like. Next slide. Should be the final one. Yep. So what happens from here? We need to lock down the utility incentives for this project. We've sort of maintained the process, and an actual commitment by the Green Bank would need to happen in most likely July. We don't really think Eversource really controls the schedule there. They've indicated they'll be selecting their projects sometime in mid-July. So, we want to get some feedback here. Like I said, while there is no commitment from you to do a project until we actually bring you that power purchase agreement to sign, we do need to, the Green Bank would have to put down a deposit in order to secure that incentive. Again, no risk to y'all, but it's just something we wanted to talk to you now to make sure that there at least is some comfort in continuing to proceed, so we can secure that incentive just to preserve the option. Should the RFP go well and the numbers look good and the board wants to proceed, we want to make sure we have that incentive to make the project work. So assuming we get that, we would then do our RFP for contractors in Q3 of this year. This is calendar quarters. And that would give us our input to come back to you with the final PPA rate. And at that point, we would give you hard numbers on what the expected savings from the project would be. And at that point, you have to decide whether you want to sign and move forward. So I'll pause there and can go back to any slides if there's specific questions or answer any general questions.
Why don't we pull the slides down and that way we can all see. So thank you. We can pop them back up if we need to.
Each other. Yeah.
All right. So for our board members, if anyone wants to make a motion around this, we can start discussion and then go to a motion. Do you have a question? Or do you?
I actually just had a question, but we have to make
Okay,
a
so
motion.
that's all right. We'll start with questions. I'm fine.
Clarence, how does this differ from like the system that's currently installed at Samuel Staples Elementary School? I know that's a ground-based system, but as far as the energy generation, do they own that system? Do they rent that system?
Staples, it's the same situation. The provider owns it, and we buy electricity in Easton from that system.
And that I understood powers pretty much the whole school and then some. Is that correct?
That was the concept. It does now. It's getting most of the school. There's 2 phases to it. So the first phase didn't. They
Right.
had a second phase, and with the completion of the second phase, they got closer to the majority of school. And to the Mackey's point, you're never going to get the whole school because it just wants that. So they have a conservative estimate, a max of like 84%. So that's what it's happening in Easton also.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Okay, so we have looked at solar quite extensively at Region 9 and in Reading, just so that everyone's aware. There was a committee of private citizens, Jim Lang, Chris Say. There was a whole group of very dedicated and thorough retired executives that did an extensive evaluation of solar energy. And we looked at solar project at Barlow, and that was 3 years ago, I believe. And we just came to the conclusion that it's not the right time. It's not the right approach, I think, right now, what's being suggested. It's important that we all know we're in year 7 of a 10-year warranty on roofs. All those panels that they're showing you on the roofs are going on top of areas that are roof restorations, and some are roof replacements, but many of them are roof restoration projects, which again are going to need replacement or work ongoing. It's not the type of roof system that you can just plunk these panels on. We've also looked at the cost of removing the panels, which, again, the Green Bank group was very careful to say that they don't want to put panels on an area of the roof that will need to be re-roofed. But the reality is that if that does happen, it's at our expense to remove those panels. And the cost of removing those panels and redoing the roof and bringing those panels up will be more than what you're going to save in energy over the next several years.
Mike, can we have you just pause there? So is that correct, Mike's statement that if we do have to replace sections of roof, the pulling down the panels and replacing them is at our cost? That's not
That is
part
correct.
of your
That's why they
maintenance.
typically go on a roof that has 15+ years of life. So you won't do that. So when I spoke with Walter today, he indicated the roofs had been replaced within the last 4 to 5 years. So his estimation, there's 15 years of life left on it. But Mike is correct in the statement that if once they're on and you need to take them off, it would be on whoever the owner of the building would be responsible for that.
Okay, thank you. All right. Sorry, Mike, just wanted
No,
clarity.
it's fine. It's fine. You can check. I would hope my information is accurate. The roof restoration was done in 2014. Again, 10-year warranty. So we're in year 7. I just feel like the risk of having issues with our roof is great. It's also important to understand that what we're looking to do here is secure ZRECs, and ZRECs are those tax credits that they will go to the contractors that install the systems, because they're the ones that can utilize the tax credits. Or I think I heard Green Bank say they monetize them and then distribute them. But the reality is, as a tax-free entity, we can't use the ZRECs. But ZRECs are very much, I don't think that it's good faith to monopolize ZRECs that we know we're really not going to use. I can't see us putting the type of system, the amount of panels up on the roof within the next year or two. It just doesn't seem to make sense. We looked at all this extensively. We had a whole committee that looked at everything and explored all of this. And, solar energy is not the type of thing you do on a whim where you say, someone made a phone call and someone came out and someone said, hey, we can put panels all over your roof and you can save a lot of money. It's something that you really need to do in a deliberate and thoughtful process. It's not something you decide overnight to do. I also feel that, again, it's important to understand that we all want to be green. We all, I think everybody on the board wants to reduce our carbon footprint. That's the best thing we could ever do. It's a great example for our children. It's a wonderful thing. We looked at solar arrays on the ground at Barlow, but there again, the locations where we could put the solar array and the cost of the large cable that would be needed to go underground to supply that power, it just makes it so that it's just not it's not an opportune venture for us at this point. Solar is making great progress. At some point, we're going to put power walls, which they have residential, they have some commercial. We're going to put big power walls so you can have batteries that store your energy that you have during the day so that you could use it at night. But we're just not there yet. And I just I'm uncomfortable just saying that we're going to do this, we're going to look at it, when I know that it's highly unlikely that this can happen. And I just don't think that this is the right approach. I think if we're going to make a commitment to initiating a solar initiative, we should do it the way we have in the past, where we, again, thoughtfully examine the buildings and figure out where we can, what size system we can, and how exactly that will be utilized. And again, for the best interests of the taxpayers, I think that's important. So I would not be in favor of moving forward with this at this time.
All right, thank you. Other board members, any questions or comments? Oh, Karen, I saw your hand.
Yeah, sorry. Is this the same company that Samuel Staples has used, or is this a different company? Is this a different?
Go ahead, Emily.
Yep, the Connecticut Green Bank, our agency, financed the system at Samuel Staples. Yes.
And to Karen, let you know, the Connecticut Green Bank is a quasi-state agency. It's not a private company. It was set up to address some of those concerns Mike had about the for-profit ventures doing it, so municipalities can't benefit from the tax credit. So the state legislature took action to sort of bridge the divide between the needs of municipalities and the tax credits.
Yeah, thank you. I understand that it's not it's not a exactly all for-profit venture. I understand it's a combination sort of between the state. No, I was just curious if it was because it's a different, like it's a solar field. Is that what they call it at Samuel Staples?
Right.
That it's a different, I thought it was
the field at Samuel Staples, the roof line is different, so that it was much more practical to put it on the ground because they had the land, and it was the roof is not conducive. It's not a flat roof throughout.
So if we were to do sort of move forward, the inspection of the roof and all of that information will be forthcoming from Mackey's company. Is that?
Yes, what we're asking for now is just to be willingness to get on the list, and there's no commitment to do anything beyond that, because Mackey's Connect Green Bank would have to prove and do an RP and say, here's the numbers, do you want to proceed? At that point, you'd be doing, but right now, we're just asking you on the list to sort of secure our spot for the future. So there's no cost or exposure at this point. And if it turns out the roof is not viable, then the roof's not viable. But if you're not on the list, you can't sort of have that discussion to do further due diligence.
Getting on that list, does that restrict us from seeking other vendors to provide bids for this?
When you say restrict,
It looked like it was
asking to do is you're committing that if you're going to do a project, you would do it with them. Not that you will do a project, but if you do a project, you'll do it with them. They're the actual construction of the project, they put out the bid and run that operation.
right, but construction on their schedule, I believe, wasn't until second quarter 2022. So we're locked up with them for at least a year before we would get to construction. So if another vendor approached us, we wouldn't be able to talk to them about it because we're committed here for a year. Is that correct?
I'm not sure that's correct, because the point is, if we proceed at this point, you're not committed to anything, so you wouldn't be all the.
I guess let me rephrase my question. So, if we commit to this company, and next week another company comes and says, "Hey, we want to put a field on your roof or in one of the sports fields," are we able to entertain that or not?
Emily, would you respond to the terms of your agreement?
I'm not being critical. I'm just trying to understand the lockup period.
No, you would not be able to. I mean, it's non-binding, and I guess if that's really the desire, I mean, frankly, just in terms of, I think as mentioned earlier, we're not. We're a quasi-state agency focused on trying to make solar projects happen that wouldn't happen otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
If you really, if that's really, if this project can happen and y'all are going to pursue that's great, and you don't need us to pour all these state resources into trying to make this project happen. So I mean, just in good faith, I would hope you wouldn't. If that's the case, let's just be clear about it. That's great. This project will happen. We don't need to be involved, and we'll step back, because if we do get the ZREC, then we have to put a deposit down on in order to secure that incentive. As Mike said, there's only it's not a tax incentive, but it's a separate state incentive. But he's right, like there's only a limited amount of them. So it would be preventing whoever was behind us in line from doing their project unless you actually move forward. So
okay.
I mean, you would be tied in with us again, unless you want to, you could. It's a non-binding agreement, so you could walk away as a quasi-state. We're not looking to fight with Board of Education, so we could legally assign that ZREC. I mean, in terms of the timing, any other vendor you talk to would also have to get the ZREC to make a project work. They've already that deadline is passed for this year, so there's no one who, unless you had us get the ZREC for you and then went to another vendor, no one's going to be able to come close to that schedule. And frankly, even if you had someone now and they had bid, given the sort of the interconnection and engineering and everything that has to happen, that's probably where
that's all right. We have an HVAC roofing project going on right now, so we don't need to put panels up there at the moment until we get that done over the summer.
Yeah.
I have another question. So do you pay us for using our roof?
No, not under this model.
Okay, so you're not renting our acreage to put the panels on?
No, for generation, for a project like this where the electricity is actually flowing to the school, that you're benefiting from that electricity. When you're connecting, let's say we were selling this power to the utility and directly interconnecting to the grid, and you weren't seeing the benefits of electricity, that's the model that's employed for those types of projects.
Okay, and then the electricity then coming from these panels, we get all of it, or is it being shared with other people in the program?
You get all of it.
Okay. All right. Other people have questions? Sorry, I don't want to dominate. Go ahead, Cheryl.
You mentioned it was non-binding. It's non-binding, meaning once so just to say the inspection goes through and we do say the roofs are suitable for the panels. So what remedies do we have under that contract since it's not binding to walk away? Are there any, there has to be for cause to, if we just decide, hey, we don't want to do this, the roofs are fine, but we still don't want to do this? What's exactly meant by non-binding?
Yeah, you can, with no action has to be taken, you could just say, we actually don't want to move forward with the project.
And then there's no subject to renegotiation of the rents, right? I know the rental of the property is not included in that, but is the rate negotiable once we sign this non-binding?
So I want to make sure we're be clear. We're talking about two different. The power purchase agreement is a legally binding contract to commit to buying the electricity from the system. So that is a binding agreement that you can't walk away from. It's the letter of intent that would be signed. That's the non-binding one. So that PPA would not be put in front of you until the fall or early winter of this calendar year. So and at that point we would have seen Clarence's facility assessment. We would have a sense of the roof. We would have looked at the roof warranties, and be able to address all those issues before anyone would commit. Again, we don't want to get into a situation where the roof is not suitable for solar.
Cheryl, to answer for that, clarify the question. The ask now is to agree to the letter of intent, which is non-binding. That allows them to do the due diligence, and then in the fall, they'll come back with their analysis. Here's what we found. Do you want to proceed, yay or nay? If you say nay and walk away, then you walk away. If you say yay and sign the PPA, that is what becomes binding later on. So right now, there's no risk exposure to the district or the town.
Except if we want to move forward, except we're locked into the vendor if we do want to move forward, or the quasi agency.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I had a question on the asset. So the panels themselves, who is purchasing those? The district or?
No, there's no money out of our pocket, Todd.
So who pays for them though?
Contractor.
The contractor does for the tax credit offsets?
The Green Bank would pay the contractor to purchase those. So we're paying for them.
Okay. And you mentioned there was a deposit. Is that what is that?
The utility.
I know what a deposit, but the deposit.
Right, in order to Mike's earlier point, there's a limited number of these incentives or projects that get incentives. Utilities want there to be some commitment when they give those out so that people aren't just grabbing them,
Right.
So they require you to put down a deposit in order to secure the incentive, which is then returned when the system actually is turned on. It'll be about $11,000 in the case of this project. So the Green Bank makes that deposit.
Okay. Thank you. Right. Others, any other questions?
No, other than, do you have calculations as to how much profit is there for the contractors and for the Green Bank? In other words, we're saving 22%. What is the revenue for the contractor in the Green Bank? Have you done those calculations?
No, because the contractor, we don't know who that is. That would be determined through the RFP.
Right.
And yeah, so don't have that number. The Green Bank is, so our role in this is so we supply all the upfront capital to do what the chairman was talking about, purchase the panels, all the labor and everything, and then our sort of essentially a loan provider to the entity that'll actually own it. We partner with it's actually a nonprofit, state nonprofit, to be the owner of the system. So I mean, we just like any capital provider would earn a small return on that debt. But I'd say it's below market, the rates.
Right. Now, I guess what I'm curious about is, so we're projecting over the life of the panels, and that's, so we're saying, did you say 20 years or 30 years?
20.
20. So panels start to degrade by what, 1% a year or something. So after 20 years, they're really not as efficient. So that wouldn't matter to us because the green bank or the contractor, whoever would own the panels, and we would still be locked in with that rate. But I'm just curious, what would be the potential revenue for the provider, for the contractor? In other words, would it be greater than $949,837 over the 20 years?
Just pulling my calculator out. I mean, if this system were built at the same cost as most of the systems from our first RFP, it would cost around roughly between 1.6 and $1.7 million. Again, I can't speak to what the contractor would, what their profit is from that. I mean, for one, I don't know actually who that is and what their actual cost would be. But we would run a competitive process to make sure that we're driving down that cost as much as possible while still, finding a reputable contractor who has experience building systems of this size.
Sure.
I guess the typical margin for an installer is, I guess, between 5 and 10%. I don't know, Alan.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, that's
right.
Are there other buildings or within the other school districts in Eastern Reading besides Staples? Are any of the others signed up, or have you approached any of the others? Because I mean, that was a lot of blue on our roof.
Yeah.
So who else is participating?
The 2 Reading
besides
schools have already signed up. Staples is done, and we're working on finishing up Helen Keller. So the 2 Reading schools have signed up a few weeks ago. Staples is done, and we're having a conversation with Helen Keller. And what's delaying that is we anticipate some major projects coming up and replacing the roof. So we may have to pause that until the roof gets replaced.
Right, but I think I heard at one of the other boards that if Region 9 doesn't move forward, it's the other buildings are not an option, because there's those projects are so small that they're not profitable, I guess, enough.
Mike, I don't think that's accurate. What they said was the Region 9 is the larger project. The other 2 projects could proceed, but the bang to the town and the taxpayers is greater if Region 9 occurs. But an individual project like at Redland Elementary, we had 2 projects within that one building. We could do one of the 2, but the point is the impact for the taxpayers would be greater if Region 9 occurs because it's the biggest building in the portfolio.
Is that correct? Because I thought I heard it differently.
Emily and Mackie, you want to?
Clarence is correct. We've got 10 or 11 towns, I forget, that are a part of this RFP and this effort. So
you're bundling enough that you can do the smaller projects.
There's significant scale, to deliver good cost, across the board.
Okay.
I mean, Mike's concerns are real, and something that needs to be evaluated before. Again, I don't want to put an $11,000 deposit down until that stuff it's resolved. So if that's the major concern, as it should be, we can do some more diligence between now and the next meeting in July to assess further feasibility, and come back and speak to that.
Mackie, problem, we don't have a meeting in July, so you would be in the fall. That's what the timing issue here.
Oh, I'm sorry. We looked
Region 9 has a meeting.
I thought there was
Region 9 has a meeting already in July.
So to the board, from my perspective, the question is, there's definitely more questions that need to be answered. But the question is the board willing to proceed with no risk, financial risk or exposure to the board, to agreeing to get on the list so we can answer those questions and stay sort of on the schedule without any financial exposure to the board or commitment from the board?
So I'll put it to the board. Does anybody want to make a motion? Gwen, I saw your hand up.
No, I guess my concern is less that I understand there's no financial risk, but I'm a little bit concerned about the risk of time that we don't necessarily have. And I think that, I remember doing this when we went through this a couple of years ago. And at that point, my feeling was this is something that really needs to be done in conjunction with a major roof overhaul, which also looked like it was going to be in the pipeline down the road, because we've got different parts in different stages. And I'd still probably just be in favor of bundling those two major projects, which we are not in a place either financially or just staff and board time to take on right now. But they're definitely both things that I would like to see happen over the next few years. So those are my only thoughts.
All right. So I'll still put it out there. Is anyone inclined to make a motion to move forward with the commitment?
I'll make it, sort of.
All right.
Give it a go. I make a motion to move forward with the inspection, I guess, of the roof and the proposal from Connecticut Green Bank to move forward with the project for the solar panels for the roof at Joe Barlow.
All right. And second, board member? I see Cheryl for a second. All right, any further discussion or questions? All right, I'll call the question then on the motion. So maybe just do roll call, because I don't think I see everybody, or we lost some board members. So I'll just go down to Cheryl.
Yes.
Juliet, I don't think joined. Okay. Mike?
No.
Gwen? Sorry, Gwen.
You're muted.
Gwen, you're muted. Sorry.
No.
No. All right, thank you. Karen?
Yes.
Mary Lee?
Not at this time. No.
I'm sorry. No.
No.
All right. Maureen, she had to drop. Let's see her. Okay. And myself, no. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 no's, 2 yeses, so it does not pass.
I'd like to thank Emily Mackey and her team for joining us this evening.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation and the questions. I do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right, so with that, then we will move on. And thank you, Mr. Zachary, for arranging that and bringing them in. It's good conversation. Thank you. Next item, summer capital. So it's the new item E, summer capital improvement projects and governance. And I think Mike I think this one's for you for summer capital improvement projects. An update, I guess, for the board. I don't know if there's any action that you need from us at this moment.
Yeah, no, I wasn't sure based upon the wording of the motion.
Well, we left it kind of open.
What that was. Yes, the Joel Barlow HVAC and safety improvement, gym safety improvement project is progressing. The plans are almost ready. The contractor had to do some additional structural work based upon the steel trusses on the gym. And so there's going to be some reinforcing that's going to occur to accommodate the rooftop unit. But other than that, everything is moving forward. The building inspector's been informed, all town officials have been informed of everything. All the equipment has been ordered. The chillers are due end of this month or beginning of July. We've had conversations with the installer as to timing the chillers in a way so we can try to minimize the length of time that the building will not have any cooling. We're figuring it may be 2.5 to 3 weeks. So that's something that, again, is going to have to be sequenced carefully. But really, there's no other option. That, you know, it's the summertime and the chillers need to be done. And I think we learned at the end of the school year that the building can't function with one chiller when it gets really warm. So we will have 2 new chillers. Everything will be, you know, back to, they're actually more efficient, and the school will have greater efficiency and greater capacity with the new chillers because of their efficiency. Other than that, everything else is moving forward. The staff is taking down the banners and securing them from the gym so that the contractor can get in there and start to put ductwork and get going on a lot of the prep work that's needed in advance of the install. But everything is moving on schedule at this point. So just moving forward.
Great. All right, any questions? I don't think there's anything you need the full board to approve at this point, correct?
No, not at this time. We'll assemble the building committee probably weekly or bi-weekly as the project starts to get in, you know, full swing, to keep everyone updated, and then the committee will report back to the board.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the new item F, start of school year preparations and potential purchases. So, Mr. Zachary.
That title sort of threw me off. You say start of the school year. You mean the end of the
Yeah, so
school year?
next school year, yes. If there's anything we need to be on the lookout for or make approvals to purchase over the summer.
Okay.
Or after July 1.
All right.
If nothing, we'll move on.
There's nothing. I don't have anything. So
okay.
I just.
All right. No, we just want to be sure. You know.
The school's not presenting to me that they want to purchase in advance, so I don't have anything.
Okay. Because I also think it's an opportunity of unexpended funds as well. So
that's what I'm thinking. I'm more focused on unexpended funds. Yes.
Okay. All right. All right. So we'll move on then. And we can ask you that question again in July as well.
Okay.
All right. So then we'll move on to item G, finalize 2020-2021 unexpended funds for the fiscal year.
All right. Now that's much more what I was anticipating
All right.
talking about. Let's see if I can share. You all got.
Yeah, let me make you a host so you can share. 1 second.
All right.
Okay.
Not quite yet. Let's see. Try it again. There we go. Start off with the healthcare analysis. Can you all see that?
Yes.
All right. That's the healthcare report. Okay. So we've been having a fantastic year, as you all recall. Our May claims went up slightly over our average. That's to be expected because, let me scroll down. So Mr. Diggs, look. So we end up having $220,000 worth of claims in May, which is was higher than April and what we were averaging in the fall before the little technical glitch with Anthem. So that's not unsurprising given that people by May probably have exhausted their deductible, so not unsurprising. The net result is we've been drawing down our reserve fund balance as we start off the year with $1.1 million. We've been drawing that down. We're down to 238. which means that we have funds from the what we allocated in the 270, 271 account that we can transfer over. Right now, we've got approximately just around $950,000 encumbered in that account. So basically, if we move that over, that'll put our reserve fund balance basically approximately what it was when we started the year. We got to get through June's claims, but my recommendation would be to move those funds over to replenish the reserve fund balance, at least to the levels we were at the beginning of the year. Does anyone have any questions about the health claims report?
So what was, can you scroll down a little bit just so we can
Yes,
see
sir.
the bottom? Yep, thank you.
So your monthly average is just over 150,000. Which is below your 3-year average, but above your average last year. But last year was a pandemic year when folks weren't able to go to the doctor, so that could explain that difference.
Okay. Board members, any questions? I think, sorry, I can't see everybody, but I think to see Mike.
I should just leave my hand up.
Yeah, it'll be easier.
Yeah. So the question is, we have 238,883 in the reserve now. Is that what we said?
Yes, as Mike, as the end of May.
As of end of May. But I guess where I'm getting confused is that what we're doing right now is we're drawing from the reserve to pay claims rather than using the budgeted money or funds that are in our operating budget.
What we've been doing, Mike, is Vicky has basically only drawn down from the budget money when we had sufficient claims. The claims have been so low in Region 9, we haven't had to draw it down. So like I'll use the example of Reading, we've had to draw down everything because they've had a very poor claims year. So if there's not a lot of claims, Vicky has been drawing it from the town just sort of reduce amount sort of administrative work. So she's been using what's been in the bank. Now that we're at the end of the year, we want to replenish what was in the bank. So we put us back at the level, because right now the money's still sitting in the town. We haven't pulled it down from our accounts. So that's how she's approached it this year.
Okay. And that just has to do with procedure, how
yes.
timing it, because
exactly.
Typically we would use our, the money that we have budgeted for those expenses, right?
Yes, it's just procedure, yes.
Right. So what we're saying then basically is, again, like was reported when we're in budget deliberations, that it looks like we're going to end the year with the same size health reserve that we started the year with. And that, again, we've kind of been on mark with our budgeting for the health costs for the year.
Correct. So once I stop sharing this, I'll show you the budget item summary. Well, you have one. If you look at the counts 270 and 271, you will see $949,000 is encumbered. And that money is what would be coming over to the bank account. So the 949 plus the 232 puts you at 1.18 million. And we start the year off at 1.17. So that's puts you basically where you start, slightly above where you started the year this year.
Okay, but then just to follow up, what would, well, a two-part follow up. What is the recommended health reserve balance? Is it between 2.5 and 3 months?
Yes, sir.
So using that calculation, our health reserve should be like 700,000-800,000, something like
Correct.
that.
Yeah.
So you can either put it at the recommended amount or like you start the year slightly above the recommended amount. That's a decision you all have to make.
Right. So, but we could also use some of that encumbered money as unspent funds and allocate it in other areas because it's
Correct.
not in health reserve at this point.
Correct. Yes. This is why we're bringing up. So you could put it in the capital. You can do whatever. You have to make the choices how you want to spend it.
Yeah, I mean, we've always been somewhat cautious with our health reserve, given our structure and the fact that we would have to go back to the towns to, you know, get additional funding if we were to run short. But right now we're running, you know, slightly above what our projections would be. So I think what we have to do is determine what our comfort level, what the board's comfort level is for that health reserve.
Mike, I think you're correct. One caveat I would say is we still don't, June's numbers aren't in yet. So you want to sort of see where June pans out and then, you know, make a decision there, because you may get a surprise in June that, you know, throws everything off.
Knock on wood.
Right.
Okay.
So if there's no more questions about the health claims report, I'll go to the budget object summary. I can show you some of those balances. Are there any questions about the health claims report?
No.
All right, so
I think we're good.
All right, I'll stop sharing there. Actually, you know what? I probably could have just kept it open because it's just a. All right, so this is what you all have. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Dated June 17th.
A tiny bit bigger.
Sure. We sent this out on Friday, so Friday's payroll would be reflected, which it is. So I'm going to show you what's June 17th, and I'll show you what I did. I ran it again today. So to get down to the sort of heart of the matter, at the top of the page here, you see 270, 271. This is those accounts I was talking about. You see the encumbered in the third column in from the right. Those two numbers sum up to the 949 I was talking about. So you've got 429 and 270 and 520 and 271. Those that gives you that money I was saying that we've encumbered it, but now that we're at the end of the year, odds are we're not gonna hopefully have a $900,000 claims in June. So most of that money would be available for you all to decide what you want to do with it. But I'm going to scroll down to the bottom now to give you the gist of the matter. So as of the 17th of June, we were showing $1.9 million of available unspent funds. So that is as of Friday. I'm going to switch screens now and give you as of today. So we went down a couple $1,000 since Friday. So we're at $1.9 million. I'm going to now share, I'm going to show a different screen so you sort of see what in reality, what that number really is, because we got payroll still to come. So let me share here we go. Can you all see that? I'll try to make it a little bit bigger.
Yes.
So this is the same data I just showed you, but instead of being in a PDF, it's an Excel spreadsheet. So there's the 1.9 that I just showed you before as of today. So the balance as of 622 is 1.9 available. We know we've got projected payroll for the rest of the month of 757,000 and change. We have an estimated payment of differential for our night custodians and substitutes of about 35,000. We have contractual payouts for folks who are leaving us for, you know, unused sick leave and things of those nature of 89,912. You all have agreed to fund the food services fund of 37,000 in the tri-board meeting. We have encumbered, we have balances in transportation and professional services of 223, 173. Those bills tend to come in late, so I don't want to assume that money's available because we tend to get those bills, you know, into June or July. That will fluctuate. If it's not there and we don't need it, then the balance will go up, but that gives you projected unspent funds of 593. That also does not include the $950,000 I talked about for the health services. So if this 593 will fluctuate depending on what ends up happening with the transportation and professional services, which are mostly sped related in June and July. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and Clarence, those are all the bigger. I'm assuming you still have other bills outstanding, but these are all kind of the substantial.
Yes,
these are the substantial ones that are out there. Yeah. Okay.
Like we know,
so
like the payroll, we know we have to pay staff, and we got that figured out to the penny. The differential is an estimate. The contractual payouts are to the penny. The food services to the penny. You've already agreed to that. The transportation and pupil services, that's count 510 and 330. I'll scroll up so you see where I'm getting that. So here's 330. You see, we got a balance available 173, but I suspect that's going to be used, but I don't know because those bills are always trailing.
Right.
So that's why I'm saying, let's assume we use it all. We may not end up using it all, but that and transportation, you know, is where you get a little bit of a delta. So right now it's about 600,000 in unspent, excluding the healthcare, and then what happens with transportation and professional services is what we're projecting. And to your point, Mr. Chairman, there are other smaller things that come in, but they're not significant like these items.
So to the extent the board decides to not to use all of that 900,000, right? Because we decide, hey, 1.1 is too, you know, we want to lower that additional, that available funds. So then that number would go up by.
Whatever you don't push over to the healthcare, that number will go up by, yes.
Got it. Okay.
Which will leave it available for you to put to capital or whatever you decide is appropriate.
Okay.
So Clarence, so if I look like it, taking the 270 object and 271, about the 949 you said.
It's 949.6. Here, I'll put it on the screen. I'll put it here.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, if you add that into the 238, and then if we use, I was just using like what we think claims might be for June, because 2018, since that was a little bit higher to be conservative. So that's 170. So that'll leave us around just over $1 million and 18. Yeah. Again, that's taking the high mark, right, on the June claims, which could be lower because last year was 130. Don't know this year, right? So yeah, we'll still be over about a million 18, something like that.
Depending how June, you'll end up between 900 and 1,018 is my
yeah, somewhere in that range. Yep. Yeah, I was trying to see what would be kind of on the low end if we're trying to go to the 2.5 to 3 for the reserves.
Yeah, we're actually, even when we're on the high end, we're only 100,000 or more above where we should be, right? So it's not.
Yeah. So I guess where I'm going with that, we don't necessarily need to make a significant contribution back into the health.
I was looking at, you know, if we looked at a unspent fund number of 105,000 or something, then we might need to look other places. But it's actually a pleasant surprise that we're doing well.
Yeah, and then I think the one item we at least need to give you direction now, right, is on pension. Is that correct?
Yeah,
so we need to make that decision here in June. The other items we can kind of give you directionally, and we can true that up in July. I guess we would have to do that now as well, so you know directionally what to do with the money.
Capital, pension, healthcare. I need to have some direction. You know, what's been happening in my other two meetings, the other districts, they've sort of given some, since we don't know hard and fast where the numbers end up, they give me sort of a cascading waterfall. If, you know, X amount to this, if anything's left over, that amount to that, anything's left over, amount to that. That's how we've sort of approached it. Since we don't have, you know, we don't know that. The big thing is you don't know what the June claims are until you do. It's hard to say how much you put in. So it just sort of give me the cascading waterfall based on the data when we get it in.
Right.
A question for the facilities committee. If you know, given this potential unspent funds, is there any project on the capital plan that we could accelerate? You know, or what's the associated price tag with that?
Funny you should ask that.
Got the capital
that's
plan.
The capital plan as approved.
One step ahead, Clarence.
Well, I try. Well, Cheryl, one thing I will say, after the project is done this summer, that current capital reserve fund balance will be significantly lower. So you might want, if you have a chance to sort of top off or something, that may be a consideration, but that's something for you all to decide.
Yes.
And roofs don't happen to be on there, right?
Nah, we don't have
trying to combine the two projects.
Not enough.
Okay.
No, and so we also have to remember that we do have certain restrictions. So question number one is last year's budget total was what, 25 million change?
Yeah,
It
'cause
had to
we
be
do
under
one-
24 because this year's is 24,351 total budget. So
Okay, so 24, let's just say it was 24,351-ish.
yeah,
We can put $243,051 into the capital reserve. Or $510, sorry,
Yeah,
right?
roughly, yeah, for
We
the
can, well,
maximum.
we're restricted to, we can put 10%, I think,
Yep.
in the capital reserve.
Yes.
So we have said in the past that we like for the capital reserve to have at a minimum of, 200 to 300,000, so that if a large piece of equipment was to fail, we would have sufficient funding to cover the cost of replacement of that piece of equipment. So that's the one dilemma. The second dilemma is that if we're talking about operating funds, I don't know, can we take the balance of that and spend it on a capital item? In other words, the balance of any unspent funds, and I'm not sure, that's not something that we have ever done in the past.
No, I don't think we've done that. We've always done up to the 10% in the reserve. I don't think
Right,
we've turned around and used any unexpended for an outright capital purchase.
right. So the question for the pension committee is, where do we stand on pension? What is the actuarial's recommendation? I would imagine, and again, I'm the wrong person to comment on this because that's the one committee I have never been on, but is it true that given the successes or the of the stock market that tends to kind of have positive effects on the pension, and usually in down years is when it's necessary to put an additional contribution, but in years when the financial sector does better, it's less common to put additional funding, or am I missing that?
Yeah, I think we've we've not really followed a hard and fast rule over the years, if I recall.
Right. No, I mean, I know it comes from the actuarial, right? Somebody makes a recommendation based on the fund.
Right.
I'm just drawing an assumption because I don't know what is the recommendation from the actuarial actuary? Is there a recommendation to increase the contribution into that pension fund or not? Or has that not been discussed?
Mike, I don't think it's been discussed recently.
Yeah. The last time the pension committee did meet though, right, the market was not as good as it is now. And, but generally speaking, Mike, the last couple of pension meetings, without me having to consult the meeting minutes, we generally have returns such that there's enough, we're typically in a good funded position with respect to pensions. But,
Right.
but to Clarence's point, we don't have the recommendation yet based on the last actual, based on the latest actuarial work, which we'll probably won't get, I think my recollection is probably in summer.
So again, I think if we're looking to do some kind of cascading, I'd say let's, we can continue to discuss, but I'd like us to get to a motion where we can say, let's put, the 10% into the capital reserve. Let's put either a dollar amount or a percentage into pension. Let's put a percentage or whatever into healthcare, and whatever's left, give to the towns or something like that, so we can give some kind of, direction. I think this is where we ultimately need to get to a motion for this evening to give Clarence enough time to make his accounting entries and so forth when the final bills come through.
Yes, although pension's really the only one that needs
Pension's
to be
the
done
main
by
one,
June 30th, right?
Yeah.
So that's the one that, and I did want to come, I see Jeannie Wenshu was on this meeting, and all the years of her hard work to get the pension fund to where it is now, because for many years, we were making additional contributions and playing catch up. So it's nice that we're in a good position at this point. So
There were a lot of retirements this year, right? Would that affect it? You know,
Not this year.
oh,
Teachers retire, go into the teachers retirement
so
board. That's for non-certs, and that's an older, that's a grandfathered pension fund at this point. So
okay.
there's no new participants. So Cheryl, do you feel like it would be advisable to put additional funds into the pension?
I think it's always advisable to put additional funds in the pension.
Exactly.
I'm trying to remember what directionally we indicated last year. I want to say we kind of just came up with an estimate of probably about 100,000 at directional, right, at the end of the school year, if I try to remember that. And just from our last pension meeting, I think that should put us in good shape again, barring pending confirmation.
Right. Because that's just really topping off, right? Because we already make our contribution. This is just additional.
And the market returns have been so good. Again, it's not that cyclical, but over time it does help. So I'd be surprised. We're in a typically good funded position to begin with, and so this would only help. So I'd kind of just directionally propose that, just to be consistent with what we did last year, and then just to take it a step further, I'll comment further on the other components with respect to the healthcare funding. If we take at our 200K is about our monthly run rate, so to speak, I'd recommend at least 4 months of healthcare reserve. So that gets us at 800,000, which is, I think we talked about the 1.1. So that gives us a kind of 300K cushion or decision-making to decide whether or not to allocate that to capital. If we use our 10% of the excess, right? So I think we showed up earlier, 1.6 minus the 770 for the CapEx, that gives us 800,000 left. That's 10%, so 80,000. So if you take 80, 100 for pension, 80 for CapEx, 4 months of reserve for healthcare, that's 800,000. 9, that gets us to one. I guess it gets us to about $1 million in terms of allocation. If we go by Clarence's number that they were expected to have an unexpended funds of one.
Clarence, your number was around 590.
593,060.
You're a little high, Cheryl, I think.
No, I'm factoring in the 900,000 of the unexpended, as that's not including Clarence's number, unless I'm not doing that right.
So can you
He's
guys
assuming that we're going to keep it all. Yeah.
So the 270, 271, the for the health claims is encumbered right now is the 949. So that's what we're talking about, moving some of that over, and that should be contingent on what the actual June claims are to make you get to your target level. So that's that, and then the other stuff, the 593 can possibly go up depending on what happens to the transportation and the professional services in the SPED account. So also, those are also trailing bills. So if you want to give me target ranges, we can sort of work backwards from there.
So we really have the 593 to use, basically, right? Because again, that the 949 is going to go into the healthcare on top of the 238 there to
and then
get us back.
It's going to go on top, but then you got to take out the June claims.
Then we got to take out June claims, right? Which will bring us down to the 900 to $1 million.
I thought we had flexibility, not necessarily to allocate that 949 or reallocate that to the extent that there's unspent.
You do, but what I think the chairman is saying is that if you've got 200 in the bank now and you end up spending, say, claims 200 in June, you virtually have nothing. So you move the 900 over, it gets you back to approximately where you want to be, between 8 and $1 million, is I think what he's saying. But since we don't know the June claims yet.
I got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So we take all of this. So let's say for, the 949, so 950 plus the 238 that's there. And then take 200 in claims out. We're going to be around $1 million, just under, for the reserve at the end of the year, if we take all this. So
So
give or take. So 595 or something like that is
593. And
593.
And that could go up depending on what happens these last two.
Right, with these other items.
Services.
So can we direct the director of finance to make an additional contribution of $100,000 to the pension fund, and then come to a general agreement that we're going to put 10% or the maximum into the capital reserve, And then
And
we
that
could,
would be of last year's number, budget number, so we're talking 250 roughly.
I don't know what that, yeah, I'm using 250. I think it's less
So-
than that, but
All right, so
248.
somewhere in that
something,
range,
whatever.
yeah, so 250 roughly.
That would leave us again with a rough number in 243, 063, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And again, I think there are additional invoices that are out there,
There
some
are.
expenses relating to the graduation and some of the other things. So I think we could revisit it in July when we have more definite numbers as to what is left after that and whether or not there's any opportunity to return anything to the town or towns, or, you know, whether we're
Or
closer
more
than
into
we
health,
thought.
or more into
Yeah.
health. So health or towns are the other two options.
Yeah, you could always use
Put
that,
more-
but at least we would have more information at that point, you know?
So just to be clear, my initial instructions would be to release or pay the encumbered funds for 270, 271 to the health account to
Yes.
replenish it. All right. Then you said 100,000 for the pension fund.
Yes, of the unencumbered.
Yep.
The
And then
unspent.
10% of whatever last year's budget go to capital. And then from there, we'll make some decisions.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's what your motion was, Mike.
Well, that's what again, I was talking it through before, but yes. That would be
I think that's
my
accurate
motion.
though, right? So pension 100K as a number, 10% of last year's budget, which is the max we're allowed to put into capital. And then whatever is remaining, we'll make a decision on, and we can either add more to pension, put into the health reserve, or return to town.
Not more pension. Pension will be done.
Pension will be done. Yeah, sorry, it closes out. So these two items would be done. So then after the last of the bills come through, healthcare claims, whatever's left out of the, so roughly, what was it, like 240?
Yeah,
or wherever it goes up and down. So whatever's left of that, then we'll make a decision between additional in healthcare reserve or return to town.
Right.
And we'll be somewhere in the 240, 250, depending on how the bills come out.
That's what's projected at this point. Yeah.
Okay. So, that is your motion. I just want to make sure.
Like I could do it in a more formal, but you have the gist. I don't see Juliet here. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. So we're good. And then I guess
I
if yeah. So you're also so we'll move the 270, 271 encumbered in as well as part of that, right, into the reserve.
Yes. So
Yeah,
okay. So I'll make a motion that the Region 9 Board of Education allocate $100,000 of the unspent funds for the 2020-2021 school year to the pension fund, and instruct the Director of Finance to appropriate 10% of this year's budget into the capital reserve.
Hold on, Mike, is it this year's budget or 2021 or last
Year's budget? I'm sorry.
Last year, 2019, 2020.
You caught me. Last year's budget.
And
Sorry.
Mike, I have the number. So the last year's budget is 24,133,114. So I put 10% of that in right now, so you'll have an actual number. $24,133,114.
241,000.
No, I did 10%. I don't want that.
Yep.
I'd like to have that in there,
That'd
but
be great.
All right, hold up. Hold on.
We could get a new roof for that.
Yeah, we could get a new roof for that. Just want to make sure. 24. All right.
So what? 241,330.
So just a little shy of what you originally said.
331 or 334. That's the only thing I didn't.
Yeah, that's fine. Rounding error.
No, I want to be accurate. Is it 331 or 334?
That'd be 331.
331, that's what
Yeah.
that's what I had written down. Okay, so again, move that the Region 9 Board allocate $100,000 out of the unspent funds for 2020-2021 fiscal year to the pension fund, and instruct the Director of Finance to allocate $241,331 to the capital reserve, and to put the 950,000, what's that exact number? 900 and,
949, 677, and
oh,
76
I'm looking at
cents.
it right now. Yeah, 949 to the health reserve.
All right. And is there a second?
Second, Cheryl.
Second, Cheryl. Thank you. All right. Any further question, discussion? All right. And I can't see everybody, so we'll just do a quick roll call vote. So I'll go ahead and call the question. So if we're in favor of the motion, as is with the numbers on the screen for the movements of the money for the end of the fiscal year, all in favor say aye. So I'll move down the list. Cheryl?
Yes.
Yes. Juliet? I don't think so on. Mike?
Yes.
Gwen?
Yes.
Yes. Karen?
Yes.
Mary Lee?
Yes.
All right. Maureen, I think dropped, and myself, yes. So it carries. There's 6 of us on still, so 6-0. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So our next item is the new item H, return of 2019-2020 funds to town. So I think we kind of covered it there. So we'll see what we have remaining in July and make an allocation, unless somebody wants to be bold and make a motion and an allocation now.
Are you on the new H or the new?
The new H,
E?
return of 2019-2020 funds to the towns.
That's a different item, though.
Yeah, that's the from the audit from 2020.
Sorry. Do I have them on?
But I could tee that up, Clarence.
Yeah, sorry. Why don't you, yes, sorry, not the funds that we just discussed, but a different.
Do we
funds
want to just
discussion.
wait though and see what's
Yeah,
left?
no, sorry, I
buses
was
and
confused.
stuff?
Yeah, no, sorry, I was confused. It's a different topic, not what we just discussed. Sorry, go ahead, Cheryl.
Yeah, let me tee this up, and Clarence, Mike, Todd.
It's late.
We all discussed this at audit committee, so feel free to
Yep.
jump in here or whatever I've missed. But just to recap for the board and the public, so you may recall that that Region 9 filed its audited financial statements back in December, January, right, with the state. And in those audited financial statements, as in concurrence with the audit committee, the auditors, Region 9 board, which already approved, we filed those financial statements. But those financial statements indicated that there was 93,000. I don't have the exact amount, so Clarence, keep me honest here, but the rounded amount is 93,000 that ultimately needs to get returned to the town. So it's essentially an estimate of unspent funds that was used to close the year. But upon closure of the year, it was then determined that that amount is actually payable to the towns respectively. There's no other statutory, because the year has closed, the only option we have for a Region 9 perspective is to return that money back to the respective towns. So I'll stop there with respect to background, and Clarence, Mike, Todd, feel free to jump in here. And this is all documented as discussed during public meeting.
Yeah, you described it accurately. We would have to return it to the towns based on the pro rata share of that fiscal year, of the allocations of that fiscal year, which is not this year, but the previous fiscal year, the 1920 fiscal year.
Do you have the dollar amount?
Mike, I could get it. I don't have it right handy, but Cheryl's right. It was 93,000, like 300 some odd dollars. It was not. Let me see if I can find it in my emails here.
If you have it, I can put it in and make a motion if you'd like.
Yeah, you need to allocate the proportion as well, right?
I have a draft motion too, Mike, but yours might be, is probably gonna be better than mine. So-
Do you have the dollar and the proportion in your motion?
No, I only have 93,000 rounded, so.
Well, we could do the 93,000 per the, whatever the proportion was, right, for
Well,
that fiscal year.
Yeah.
yeah, so, yeah, I
That would give you
wasn't,
flexibility.
Looking through my emails here, so bear with me. Because we had quite a bit of discussion around it. $93,230.37. Cheryl, we were close. We said 93,300, so I guess we were off by $70.
okay, so
Flipping it at late evening hours.
Yep.
I'll take a shot and I'm gonna take the easy way, but so I'll make a motion to return $93,230.37 in unspent funds from the 2019-2020 fiscal year to the towns of Reading and Easton, and instruct the Director of Finance and Operations to return the funds using the 2020-2021 enrollment projections to accurately apportion the funds back to the towns.
Mike, one question. Should it be the 2021 or should it be the 1920?
1920, right?
No, you
Based
use
on
the projections from 2021. You're right.
No, wouldn't
The
it be
money's from
better that it should have been
1920, so you
returned?
should use the 1920
Yeah,
allocations.
it's last year's money.
Wait. So no, but they're always a year off. Maybe I'm a year earlier then.
Should be a year earlier. So the
Earlier.
2018, 2019.
2019. That's my
Yeah,
mistake.
2018, 19.
Yes.
So it's October projections, 2018,
Right,
19.
because
that we
it's
use
always
for
a
the-
year
Yeah.
off. So
Yes.
yeah. Okay, so we have it, or you want me to read it again? Just move to
One more time
return
for the record.
92,230.37 in unspent funds from the 2019-2020 fiscal year to the towns of Easton, and instruct the Director of Finance and Operations to return the funds using the 2018-2019 enrollment projections to accurately apportion the funds back to the towns.
I'll
I'm
second.
sorry for going.
All right, very good. All right, so that was Mike with Gwen as a second. All right. Any further discussion? All right, I think I have all the board members on frame now, so I won't have to do a roll call here. So all in favor of returning the 93,000 unspent, raise your hand and see everybody, and it is 6-0 in favor. So it passes, motion passes. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I think that is the last of our discussion of possible action items. A long list. All right, so we will move then to public comments, which is item 8 on our list. And we still have a few members of the public with us. So if you would like to speak, please be merciful and limit your comments to a couple of minutes due to the hour. And if you can keep them to the topics at hand, that would be appreciated. And again, name and address for the record. And we'll go ahead and open up. And Dana, I see your hand up. All right, go ahead.
Yeah.
And unmute. Go ahead.
Thank you. I love that comment. Be merciful. Yeah, so Dana Benson, 34 Pond Road, Easton. And it's just remarkably complex what you have to go through. And I just wanted to, it's been a great education to listen to this tonight. So real quickly, I just want to make an observation in hearing the diversity, the equity audit women speaking. It kind of struck me as common sense that some of the kids in the special education programs, the IEPs, would perhaps, be less represented in things like the Honor Society and student government. And I guess it kept some of the things just kept striking me as sort of common sense that people that have problems, financial problems, didn't have to be on the special food programs, that maybe would have less time to participate in extracurriculars and things like that. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying that I'm glad they kept making the point that this is data and that there has to be more questions asked, because on the face of it, it just seemed to me to be common sense that we give equality of opportunity, but not everybody chooses to take it. And the fact that there are kids who are not participating in extracurricular activities doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. They could be studying hard, or they could be smoking pot with their friends. So anyway, that was just a quick thought. And I will just mention once more briefly, I would strongly urge you guys to rework the survey, fix these holes, and send it out again, and send it out in a form that's cannot be attacked for its methodology. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other members of the public like to speak? All right. Seeing none, I will move on to board member comment. Any members of the board like to comment? And Dr. Harrison, I saw you sent the list. I'm happy to read through those now, or I can hold them until July, the list of retirees.
We could hold till July, given the late hour.
Thank you, because I do want to recognize it is a long list. It's very impressive. I heard him at graduation, and just now reading, the accomplishments and the years of service from this long list of educators. It's very impressive. So I do want to recognize that group, and as well as my fellow board members as well. So, all right. Any other board members? So I'll hold that list, and we'll head it to the July meeting to properly recognize all the retiring faculty. So any other board member comment? All right, seeing none, then I will look for a motion to adjourn before 11 o'clock. So Mike, no filibuster to make us 11.
So moved.
All right, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second, Karen.
Second, Karen, thank you. All right, all in favor? Aye. All right, it is unanimous, 6-0. We are adjourned at 10:53. Thank you, everyone, for another late night, but a very good meeting. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.